Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Debany Escobar. These events took place in the state of Nuevo León, Mexico, on April 9, 2022. A disturbing image appeared on social media. In the photo, a young girl was standing on the side of the road. She was wearing a white top, brown shorts, and black Converse shoes, and her hair was down. The caption of the post with the photo said, "Yes, it's true." The girl's name was Debany Escobar. She was 18 years old. The last time she was seen was late on the night of April 9 after a party where she was with her friends. It all started on Friday, April 8, when Debany, a student at the Faculty of Law at the University of Nuevo León in Monterrey, decided to go for a walk with her friends. At about 11 p.m., she left her house. Two of her friends, Sarai and Vaughn, met her on Simon Bolivar Street to go to a party together. At 11:30 p.m., a CCTV camera from one of the stores recorded how the three girls were buying drinks. They were there for some time and then decided to go to the party just a few blocks away. However, upon arrival, they found themselves in an unpleasant situation, which led them to decide to go to another party taking place at the Quinta Diamante estate in General Escobedo. They ordered a taxi using the Didi app, which came to pick them up at 12:49 a.m. When they arrived at the location, it became clear that the party had already ended. However, the girls noticed that not far away, on the same street, another party was taking place, called Cantal Diamante. The surveillance Sierra footage shows the girls getting out of a white Kia Rio at 1:20 a.m. And only Sarai and Debany exited the car. A little later, they reached the entrance to the club. After 9 minutes, the camera filmed Debany walking in the opposite direction from the entrance. After a few seconds, she returned and everything seemed fine. But at 3:45 a.m., the camera recorded Debany running out of the club. A young man ran after her and tried to grab her. She hit him and tried to run away, but he did not let her. After that, they began to quarrel, and another guy came out to witness the altercation. After that, the girls called a familiar driver to pick them up. The driver informed her that he was nearby and would arrive in 10 or 15 minutes. A moment later, when the driver arrived, Debany got in the car, leaving her friends behind. Another camera recorded the car, showing that Debany was arguing with the driver. 8 minutes later, the driver sent a message to her friend stating that Debany had exited the car and refused to continue the ride. The driver informed that there had been an argument between him and Debany, due to which she chose to leave the car and did not want to return. He took the photo as proof that he left her on the side of the road. Debany's friends were uncertain about what to do next. They asked the driver to contact the police, but he declined, stating he had to leave for work. A few minutes later, he returned to the area, but Debany was no longer there. He informed her friends that she was missing and suggested that Debany appeared to be in poor condition, potentially under the influence of banned substance, as her speech was incoherent. The friends attempted to contact her parents, but no one answered. The conversation between the driver and Debany's friends ended at 5:16 a.m., and since then, they had not heard from her. The next day, Debany's friends were able to contact her father, Mario Escobar, they wanting to find out what had happened. Her parents were also unaware of the situation, and they promptly filed a report with the police. Photos of Debany were shared on social media, and a search effort began. On April 9, while authorities were looking for Debany, the body of a missing girl named Maria Fernanda Contreras was discovered in a house in the Apodaca area. This was one of 5 bodies found during the search for Debany. Within just 6 days, the remains of these 5 women were uncovered, which left the community in shock. 2 days after Debany went missing, a girl who was also at the party that Debany attended told on her Instagram that some people tried to help Debany and offered to take her home so that she could come to her senses. However, Debany's friend did not want this, since supposedly some trusted person was supposed to come for them, so the story took on a different character. Now Debany's friends were the main suspects. All this was very strange, and as time went on, the case became more and more complicated. At that point, the investigation had made little progress. On April 15, a reward of 100,000 Mexican pesos was announced for information about Debani. From this reward, the prosecutor's office in Nuevo León obtained a video showing Debani at 4:29 a.m., just 4 minutes after the driver had photographed her. In the video, she is seen walking toward the building of the international transport company Alcocia. She then crossed the road and approached the building's facade and vanished. With access to this video, it was believed that Debani might have gone to the transport company for help. However, the camera did not capture her entering or exiting the building. This was the last footage of Debani, leading to suspicions that the transport company could be involved in her disappearance. So, there was still hope of finding Debani alive. On April 19, the police initiated a search of the Alcocia company building. They examined all vehicles and accessed surveillance cameras, but found nothing of interest. Following this, they conducted a search in a residential building in central Monterrey, located 22 kilometers from where Debani was last seen. The police received tips that Debani's personal belongings were in apartment number 18. 2 days earlier, the GPS on her phone indicated activity in that location, as well as at the corner of the Nueva Castilla motel. The following day, police, volunteers, and canine units searched the nearby highway for evidence. They inspected a manhole in a vacant lot next to the Nueva Castilla motel. Additionally, workers from the Monterrey Water Service searched a manhole along the highway where she was last seen. However, at that point, the investigation had made little progress. At the request of Mario, a team from the National Search Commission was called in to assist with the search. That Thursday afternoon, a group of volunteers joined the effort. Police received reports from the staff at the Nueva Castilla motel about a foul odor coming from an unused tank. Officers quickly arrived at the scene, and within minutes, they discovered a body. Although it was initially unclear if the body belonged to Debani, divers confirmed that it was wearing the same clothes she had on the day she went missing. Mario identified her by a cross she was wearing. The police also requested security camera footage from the motel, but the staff claimed the cameras only displayed live footage and did not record. Meanwhile, Debani's body had been submerged in water for nearly 2 weeks, making it nearly unrecognizable and in a state of decomposition. Despite the clothing and accessories, DNA testing was necessary for identification. An autopsy conducted confirmed that the body was indeed Debani's, and the cause of death was determined to be a severe head injury by strong impact. Initial reports suggested that Debani's fall into the tank was not accidental, and her phone lost signal shortly after. There were no signs of violence on her body. The bruises might have been caused by a fall. However, there was swelling on her forehead and around her eyes, indicating inflammation from impact. At that time, it was believed that Debani could not have jumped over the 2-meter-high wall surrounding the motel to accidentally fall into a cistern that measured 90 by 98 centimeters and was 4.43 meters deep, with a water level of 90 centimeters. Because Debani was only 167 centimeters tall and the wall had barbed wire on top. Before the discovery, Debani's body, no one, including service dogs, noticed any unpleasant odors at the motel. Nueva Castilla had 3 tanks, with one of them clogged. In the first tank, where the body was found, they found her Converse sneakers and a piece of fabric with insects typically found on decomposing bodies. On the wall between the first and second tanks, a bag belonging to Debani was located. This bag contained a red plastic container, a white bra, 2 pieces of beige fabric, and a black and white fabric mask. In the second tank, investigators found a yellow and white lighter, 3 metal keys, a cell phone in a damaged black case, a wallet, and a plastic-wrapped gel-like substance. Conducting toxicology tests to check for alcohol or other substances in her system proved difficult. However, the presence of insects and worms feeding on the corpse might allow for DNA extraction to identify substances. The investigation agency analyzed that Nueva Castilla motel is not well known and appears abandoned from the outside. It sits along the highway leading to New Laredo, the main route between Monterrey and the United States. This highway has earned a reputation for danger, as approximately 1,000 people went missing there last year. They found no signs of a break-in near the tanks, leading them to conclude that Debani likely entered the motel through the main entrance of the restaurant. 2 days after the body was found, security camera footage from the motel was released. This was unusual because the staff had previously stated that the cameras only recorded in real time. The footage provided by the prosecutor's office shows the motel's restaurant and 2 glass doors, one facing the highway and the other leading to the tank area inside the motel. In the footage, Debani is seen entering the motel at 4:33 a.m. Another camera captures her running to the motel, going around the restaurant, and reaching the glass door. When she noticed no one was there, she dashed to the corner of the restaurant, where she stayed for about 20 minutes. Then, she ran again along the wall of the hotel. This was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Following a review of the surveillance footage, the prosecutor's office requested that the motel be placed under check. Investigators discovered that an outdoor camera at a neighboring restaurant recorded a car parked at the Nueva Castilla motel, where a man entered. They was believed that this man took Debani away in that car. Days later, the car was identified, and the man who got in was also revealed. However, after being questioned, he was declared innocent of the case. Meanwhile, Mario sought external assistance to carry out a second autopsy and compare its findings with those of the first. Everyone was left wondering why Debani exited the taxi that was supposed to take her home. New footage that surfaced in the media suggested that her departure might have been prompted by harassment from the taxi driver. In the video, the driver is seen extending his right hand toward the girl's chest, leading to speculation that she left the car due to his inappropriate behavior. In response to these allegations, taxi driver Juan appeared in the media on April 27 to share his side of the story. In the interview, Juan David denied any harassment, explaining that the footage actually captured him handing Debani a phone charger because her phone battery had died. And he said his conversations with Debani's friend, he shared an audio recording he made while Debani was in his car. In the recording, she states, "My parents deserve the truth." Juan explained that she got into the car because she felt her friends from the party were bad influences. They didn't want to see her off. Debani started crying, and Juan noted that she appeared to be in distress, possibly under the influence of banned substance, as her speech was unclear. He mentioned that, when he requested her home address to take her there, but she didn't respond. He then asked her friend for Debani's mother's phone number, but they didn't have one. While driving on the highway, Debani unexpectedly asked him to stop the car and then exited. Juan tried to persuade her to return while she stood by the roadside, but she did not come back. Then, he took a photo of Debani and sent it to Debani's friends to alert them to her location. 2 of Debani's friends also gave an interview on television. The girls mentioned that at the party, Debani was aggressive and did not accept help from anyone. She asked to be left alone. Sarai learned that Debani had a disagreement with a group of people who wanted to take her home, which caused her to act oddly. Her friends suspected that something was wrong with her drink at the party, leading to her withdrawal from socializing with others. Eventually, she ran out of the club, and some guys tried to stop her. Others also came out to assist Debani, but she reacted aggressively and insisted that they leave her alone. She mentioned that her parents were lawyers and offered money to anyone who would let her be. The girls ordered a taxi, using the same driver they had trusted before. When the taxi arrived, only Debani got in, while this driver is different from the driver they want to see again. After leaving the party, the girls attempted to call Debani's father multiple times between 3:50 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., but he did not answer. It wasn't until 8:35 a.m. that they finally reached him to ask if Debani had made it home, only to discover that she was missing. One significant piece of evidence that prompted further investigation was a promotional video from the motel, which featured a song. The video not only showcased the motel, but also zoomed in on room 174. This raised suspicions that a motel worker might have been hinting at what happened in that room. As a result, the initial search lasted about 7 hours and yielded some evidence, along with previously overlooked surveillance footage. At the request of Debani's parents, room 174 was examined for blood traces, both inside the room and in the parking lot. The prosecutor's office announced that 5 individuals present at the motel that night have already been interviewed. A white truck was noted to have arrived shortly after Debani entered the hotel grounds. However, the last 8 or 9 minutes of the footage were missing, and they might contain crucial clues for solving the case. Experts are currently working to recover the potentially deleted records. On May 5, it was reported that Debani's ID stolen from her 2.5 months prior during a robbery was discovered. A resident of Building 15, where a search had already taken place, found the ID in a flower bed of the residential complex. Nonetheless, this find has not yet contributed to solving the case. Then, new information was reported in the media. Mario accused the Nuevo León prosecutor's office of hiding the results of a second autopsy on Debani's body. In there, the findings indicate that she did not suffer multiple blows to the head from blunt objects. However, medical examiners noted bruises on both sides of her head, her forehead, both eyelids, the left side of her nose, her lips, and around her ears. The report suggests that the varying severity of head injuries was likely caused by external impact, pointing to the likelihood that these injuries were inflicted by another person, this indicating a violent death rather than an accident. Furthermore, it was determined that Debani died before entering the water, as no water was found in her lungs. The report also revealed bruises and hematomas in the genital area, suggesting abuse violence. It dismissed the possibility of strangulation, since there were no injuries to her neck. This has highlighted the persistent negligence of the police. It is troubling that, in today's world, the authorities are not trustworthy. The case of Debani Susana Escobar is not only a personal tragedy, but also a powerful reminder of the violence against women in Mexico. To date, no one has been arrested or charged in connection with her death, leaving her family and the public questioning the justice system and the safety of women in society. Debani has become a symbol of the fight against gender-based violence, a problem that affects an average of 10 women every day in Mexico. Despite protests and constant pressure from the community, the investigation and prosecution process has been slow, leaving the quest for justice for these young women a significant question mark. Debani's death has not only left her family heartbroken, but has also sparked outrage and a determination for change in society. But will this voice and struggle be enough to bring justice and end similar tragedies? The answer still lies in the future. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Klondike Bishimbayev. Klondike Bishimbayev was born on April 11, 1980, in Gildorda, which was part of the Kazakh SSR. In 2000, Klondike began his career as a bank manager. He completed a short internship at the Ministry of Economy, then spent several years in senior roles at major companies before returning to the ministry. In 2016, he became the Minister of Economy, making him one of the youngest high-ranking officials in Kazakhstan. However, just 8 months later, he was dismissed due to a major scandal and was imprisoned for accepting large bribes. He received a 10-year sentence but was released on parole after 1 year. He later apologized to Nursultan Nazarbayev, the then president, who granted him a pardon. Klondike's personal life includes 2 official marriages before he met the future victim. His first marriage was to Agarim Rova in 1999, while he was still a student. They had a son, Alisander Valakin, in 2000, but their marriage ended in 2004. In 2006, while working as an advisor to the Minister of Economy and Budget Planning in Kazakhstan, he married Nazim Karmanbabagaleva. They were married for 14 years and had 3 children together. However, in 2020, Nazim initiated their divorce. Sultanat Nuknova was born on May 15, 1992, in Pavlodar, a city in northern Kazakhstan. As a schoolgirl, Sultanat developed a strong interest in astrology. She thoroughly studied related literature and created horoscopes and natal charts for her friends and classmates. To her surprise, many of her predictions turned out to be quite accurate. Eventually, she decided to turn her hobby into a profession, and success followed quickly. Sultanat promoted her astrological services on social media, offering personal and online consultations. She provided both short-term and long-term forecasts, assisted people in achieving their goals, choosing careers, and finding spiritual growth. Additionally, she offered advice on love, assessed compatibility, and helped individuals navigate their relationships. Sultanat only worked with women and girls. She quickly became financially independent by earning good money from her passion, something she knew well and enjoyed. Her social media following grew significantly, and many people sought her services, leading to consultations being booked months ahead. She was finally living the life she had always dreamed of. In the spring of 2022, Quandyke Bishimbayev, who was a dedicated fan, came across Sultanat's page on a popular social media platform. He was captivated by the young beauty and decided to reach out to her by signing up for an astrological consultation. However, she turned him down, explaining that she only offered services to women. This rejection only increased Quandyke's interest in her. He persistently sought her attention by showering her with compliments and trying to win her over, insisting that she was the only one who could help him and that he exclusively trusted her expertise. Although Sultanat appreciated his flattery, she was determined to avoid meeting him, finding his behavior distasteful. He repeatedly offered her an online consultation, but she was firm in his refusal. For months, Quandyke persistently tried to ask Sultanat out on a date. During this time, he learned almost everything about her: where she lived, who she interacted with, where she went, and what her interests were. Despite this, Sultanat continued to reject his advances but told her friends that she had an ardent admirer. Eventually, Sultanat agreed to meet him. Quandyke made every effort to impress her. He was polite and courteous. However, that first meeting was only the beginning. In a candid discussion with her brother, Sultanat expressed that the man was not her type and that a relationship between them was unlikely. Initially, neither Sultanat nor her family was worried about the Quandyke's behavior. She believed she could keep him at a distance, and her family and friends trusted that she could make her own choices. However, a month later, the situation began to shift. He found a way to get closer to Sultanat by reaching out to the eldest member of her family. He expressed a desire to speak with her grandmother and seek her blessing. This gesture affected Sultanat, but she still declined to pursue a relationship with him. Unexpectedly, in the fall of 2022, Sultanat visited her parents in Pavlodar and shared that she didn't expect any significant changes in her personal life. She confessed to her brother that she was troubled by the 12-year age gap with Quandyke and felt no romantic attraction towards him. Additionally, her astrological calculations indicated they weren't compatible. However, less than a month after that visit, her brother stumbled upon a post on social media where Sultanat announced that Quandyke had officially proposed to her and she had happily accepted. This news shocked the entire family, as it was completely unexpected. Even her friends were taken aback, as she had recently told them that Quandyke was not the right match for her and she believed nothing serious would come of it. In December 2022, just a few months after they met, they held an extravagant wedding, featuring an expensive banquet at one of the most popular venues in Astana. It's important to note that their marriage was not officially registered. They only participated in a special marriage ceremony at a mosque and did not register their union with the authorities, so they were considered civil partners. During this time, Sultanat's feelings towards her partner changed significantly. She frequently shared with her friends how intelligent, educated, well-read, and articulate he was, and how he could easily engage in conversations on any topic. She also firmly denied any wrongdoing on his part in a high-profile corruption case that led to his brief imprisonment, insisting that he had been framed and was serving time for someone else's crime. On the surface, the couple seemed happy. Klondike showered his wife with gifts, and she affectionately referred to him as her golden husband, expressing that she had no regrets about marrying him. Their friends admired them and actually celebrated her marriage. However, this happiness was short-lived. The first warning sign appeared after their wedding when the couple moved into the home of the husband's parents. The parents lived on the first floor, while the newlyweds stayed on the second floor. Almira, the mother, tried to shower Sultanat with love and support, often giving her gifts and helping her from household chores. However, she was unable to protect Sultanat from her husband's behavior. Sultanat occasionally visited her parents with her husband, but she chose not to invite them to her home because it upset Klondike and led to arguments. Initially, her family was unaware of this, but less than a month after her wedding, her brother, Ibek, visited her on New Year's Eve and witnessed an uncomfortable situation. A large festive table was set up, but the celebration was meant to be a small family gathering. When her brother and his wife arrived with gifts for everyone, Sultanat felt embarrassed because she had no gift to offer in return. To resolve the awkwardness, she decided to give the woman a bottle of expensive perfume that her husband had bought for her the day before, which she hadn't opened yet. However, her actions not only upset her husband, they made him extremely angry. He yelled that she had no right to give away what he had given her and started insulting her. The guests, sensing the escalating tension, quickly decided to leave the house. The parents, attempting to defend their daughter-in-law, were abruptly silenced. To make matters worse, in his fury, Klondike overturned the table filled with food and drinks, ruining the New Year's Eve celebration. Ibek was taken aback by what he witnessed and was unsure how to respond. The following day, during a phone call, Sultanat revealed that her husband's behavior had drastically changed since their wedding. She didn't understand why and was hopeful that the situation would improve over time. Ibek advised her to come home and end the relationship, but Sultanat firmly rejected his advice. 2 months after the incident, Sultanat unexpectedly sent her brother some selfies. In these pictures, her face was covered with severe bruises, and she asked him not to ask her any questions. Concerned, her brother attempted to reach her by phone, but she didn't answer. He then called her husband, who agreed to meet for a discussion. During their meeting, Klondike, Sultanat's husband, told him to stay out of their affairs and refused to explain the bruises. He also couldn't tell him where she was, which left her brother feeling very uneasy. Fortunately, Sultanat was discovered in her parents' country apartment, where she had a set of keys. Despite her loved one's pleas, she decided to return to her husband, claiming that she loved him and was willing to do anything to save their marriage. For a while, her husband treated her well, showering her with gifts and promising to change for her. They even took a trip together to a popular resort in the Maldives, appearing very happy. However, later, the vacation photos revealing visible bruises on Sultanat's body and fingerprints on her wrists, suggesting she had been roughly grabbed. Ibek stated that neither he nor his parents had heard his sister mention any issues in her marriage since then, although her behavior and appearance changes were telling. She had lost a significant amount of weight and became more reserved. She started wearing outfits that to cover up the bruises and cuts on her body. Additionally, she stopped taking appointments and ceased offering online consultations. On social media, she only posted photos with her husband, expressing her luck and love for him. As it later turned out, her husband prohibited her from pursuing her passion, leaving her without any income and fully dependent on him. He monitored all her actions and interactions. She needed his permission to meet friends or have lunch in a cafe without him. He even checked her phone calls and messages. Sultanat was only seen in public with Klondike, who acted like a devoted and caring husband. Most of her friends were unaware of the distress she faced at home and even envied what seemed to be a perfect family. Once, Sultanat recently shared with a close friend that her husband controlled every aspect of her life. He forbade her from working, prohibited her from communicating with her parents without his permission, and was unreasonably jealous, often accusing her of infidelity. He also physically abused her. When her friend heard this, she was shocked and urged the woman, Sultanat, to leave her husband right away. However, Sultanat reacted by yelling and insisted that she wasn't seeking advice, she simply wanted to talk about her situation. Sultanat, seeking to save their marriage, sought help from a family psychologist. However, her husband dismissed all the options suggested by his wife and insisted on using his own specialist. During their sessions, this psychologist convinced Sultanat that she was solely responsible for their problems. In a recent conversation with her brother, Sultanat expressed her concerns that her husband had hired the psychologist specifically to belittle and demoralize her once again. In the summer of 2023, Sultanat tried to leave her husband and planned to stay at her parents' house for a while. However, just a week later, Klondike came to take her back, asking her to give their marriage another chance. He suggested they move into his house, and Sultanat thought that a new environment might help their relationship. She also believed that having a child together would improve her husband's treatment of her, but she was unable to get pregnant. At the last family dinner in October, Sultanat attempted to leave her controlling husband and quickly sought a rented apartment with her brother's help. However, just 10 days later, she not only returned to him but also underwent the marriage ceremony again at the mosque, a fact she shared with her family. On November 5th, she invited her parents, brother, and a few close friends to a restaurant owned by Klondike's brother, Bakitsan Bazanov, to celebrate their reunion. During the ceremony, her husband acted very gallantly and courteously, showing his affection for her and vowing to protect her, while always keeping an affectionate eye on her. That evening, everyone was convinced of his genuine feelings and words, but tragedy was just days away. On November 9th of the same year, Sultanat's brother returned home from work and was going about his day when he received a phone call. A relative, sounding frightened, asked him if the rumors circulating on social media were true. Confused, he asked her to explain what was going on. She then sent him a link to a news article stating that the former Minister of Economy had killed his young wife. Ibek was disheartened by the news but found it hard to believe what he read. Just the day before, he had spoken to his younger sister, who had once again mentioned that she planned to leave her husband. She had asked him if she could stay over at his place, and he told her she was welcome anytime, even pointing out where the spare keys were. However, neither that evening nor the following day did she come home, and her phone had been silent since then. The man hurried to his sister's house, but found it empty. Her husband was also not picking up his phone, and the situation was becoming urgent. They quickly decided to head to the family restaurant, where Sultanat had last reached out to them, to seek answers. While Ibek was on the way, he received a call from his parents, who had seen the news and wanted to understand what was going on. However, he couldn't provide them with any information and only assured them he would find out more. Many police officers were present in the restaurant. When they learned that Sultanat's relative had arrived, they immediately offered their condolences, explaining that Sultanat had died before the medics could assist her. Ibek was in disbelief. He thought it must be a terrible mistake, but the news was unfortunately true. Witnesses indicated that by the time Ibek arrived, Klondike had already been arrested and taken to the station as the main suspect. Klondike firmly denied any wrongdoing, describing the incident as a tragic accident and insisting that he had been trying to help his wife. Additionally, his brother, and who was the restaurant owner, Bakits and Bazanov, were also taken into custody on suspicion of involvement. In the beginning, the suspect's lawyer claimed that his client was completely innocent and pointed out the lack of evidence against him. However, it was later revealed that the ex-minister and his brother had destroyed crucial evidence by deleting video recordings from cameras inside and outside the restaurant. Fortunately, experts were able to recover the footage, which shocked everyone who saw it. The investigation into this complex case lasted nearly 4 months, during which Klondike continued to assert his innocence. He acted as though he believed he could escape punishment, even as he faced serious charges of murder with extreme cruelty. Forensic experts who examined the deceased noted that they had never seen such extensive and severe injuries before. Some of these injuries occurred 6 to 8 hours before her death, suggesting she was beaten for a long time, leaving no uninjured areas on her face and body. Klondike's lawyers attempted to downplay his responsibility. He himself claimed that most of his wife's injuries were self-inflicted due to her being drunk, stating that she frequently fell and hit her head on the bathroom tiles and furniture. According to Klondike testimony, on the evening of November 8, 2023, the couple attended a concert by singer Dima Bilan with friends. During the concert, they had a heated argument, but the friends couldn't clearly explain what it was about. The loud music made it hard for them to notice that Klondike and Sultanat was fighting. They initially thought the couple were just having a discussion. Suddenly, the couple left the concert hall without saying a word. They then went to the Bao restaurant, where they continued their argument privately in a VIP cabin. The camera footage reveals that Klondike took several bottles of alcohol from the bar and went to a booth with his wife. While they shared a bottle of wine and talked about their relationship, she expressed her dissatisfaction and announced her intention to leave him. This infuriated Klondike. He screamed at her, threatened and slapped her. Following this, she called her brother and informed him that she would be staying at his house for the night because she had decided to leave her husband. Around midnight, as she was leaving for her brother's house, her husband confronted her and continued the argument. The surveillance footage reveals that the couple argued for about 15 minutes. Eventually, the man persuaded his spouse to re-enter the building for a short time. Inside, they continued to fight in the vestibule before isolating themselves in a stall, where there were no cameras, leaving us to speculate about what happened there. Footage from the hallway camera captures Sultanat attempting to escape from her husband. She acted calmly and maintained her distance while he repeatedly tried to close the gap, grabbing her hands, shaking his head, and pushing her against the wall. Sultanat, unable to escape, tried to hide from her abusive husband by locking herself in the bathroom. However, he began to kick the door violently, causing damage as he attempted to break in. When he finally got in, he struck her multiple times in the face. He then said that she was dependent on him, claiming that he had met all her needs. The husband alleged that in a fit of anger, Sultanat stripped off her clothes and jewelry, flushing them down the toilet to show that she did not want anything from him. Alternatively, some accounts suggest that he forced her to undress to humiliate her. After the gold jewelry fell down the drain, Klondike became enraged and struck his wife multiple times in the face. He then pushed her forcefully, causing her to fall and hit the toilet. During the trial, he argued that his wife was drunk and had fallen several times while undressing, hitting her head on the tiles and plumbing. He claimed that they had planned to go home after leaving the restaurant, but he felt unable to drive because he had consumed too much alcohol. He also didn't want to call a cab because he was embarrassed by his wife's drunken state, as she was wearing a coat over her underwear. They returned to the booth in the same stall. Shortly after, the couple exited, but Sultanat paused to look at her injured face in the mirror. Her husband then aggressively pushed her towards the exit, leading to a violent confrontation. He brutally attacked her with his hands and feet and pulled her by her hair. Around 7 o'clock in the morning, he dragged her back to the VIP cabin. There, he ultimately caused her death, although during the trial, He claimed he hadn't harmed her, arguing that she had fallen and injured herself on the floor and furniture. He said that Sultanat lay on the sofa and fainted. He noticed a bruise on her face and felt worried, but instead of calling an ambulance, he contacted a fortune teller to see if everything was okay with his wife. The fortune teller assured him that she was just drunk and needed rest, which made Klondike feel more at ease and decide not to interfere. He mentioned hearing snoring, which he later realized was actually a death rattle. Around noon, he realized his wife was no longer breathing and urgently called his brother, Bakitson, for help. They decided to close the restaurant and ask the staff to leave. After that, they erased footage from all the CCTV cameras. During the trial, Bakitson stated he trusted his younger brother's claim that Sultanat was just drunk and asleep and agreed to delete the recordings, which he believed showed her behaving inappropriately and bringing shame to herself and her family. Bakitson only called an ambulance later in the evening, by which time her body was already cold and rigor mortis had set in. He claimed he attempted to resuscitate her, but it was too late. Sultanat had already passed away. The investigation also focused on Nazim, Klondike's wife and mother of his 3 children. A few years prior, when the ex-minister was arrested for corruption, she defended him publicly. However, shortly after his release, she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and stating that she had outgrown their marriage. However, after her ex-husband was publicly accused of brutally murdering his new wife, Nazim gave an honest interview. She acknowledged that he was indeed capable of such a crime. Nazim shared that they had been married for 14 years, but after the birth of their second child in 2011, her husband became aggressive, selfish, and narcissistic. He began to think the world should revolve around him, with his opinions as the most important. Furthermore, he constantly cheated on her, without any effort to hide it. Klondike was arrested in 2017, and it was only then that Nazim discovered the full extent of his infidelity by accessing his personal data on his phone. She learned that he had multiple mistresses, who frequently changed. After he was released by the Pardon Commission, he became increasingly violent and aggressive. A month later, a minor disagreement escalated between the couple, and in a fit of rage, he smashed the toilet lid and threw it at Nazim. Nazim successfully avoided confrontation, but in that moment, she understood that her marriage had come to an end. She believed that Klondike had suppressed his darker tendencies for a long time, knowing she would not accept such behavior. However, he did not hold back when it came to humiliating and insulting his mistresses, who were unable to resist him. Regarding Sultanat, Nazim thinks that Klondike deliberately selected his target and tested her patience and willingness to endure. Once he realized she would stay quiet and wouldn't leave, he revealed his true nature as a refined sadist. The trial started in March 2024, and it quickly became apparent that it would be challenging. The family of Sultanat demanded that the trial be as transparent as possible, allowing journalists to attend and the public to observe the proceedings. They were concerned that Klondike might leverage his wealth and extensive connections to pressure witnesses and judges in an effort to evade a severe punishment. He requested a jury trial, which was approved. A total of 12 jurors were chosen, 10 main jurors and 2 alternates, along with the presiding judge. Klondike had previously been convicted of a serious crime but was out on parole. A new serious offense could have led to a life sentence. In a jury trial, he would only face the death penalty if every juror, along with the judge, unanimously agreed. The chances of this happening were very low, so he held on to that hope. During the trial, he repeatedly claimed he was not guilty of premeditated murder with particular cruelty, arguing that the incident was accidental and resulted from a tragic mix of circumstances. He stated that his spouse provoked him by insulting him, yelling, and becoming physically aggressive. However, numerous recovered video recordings from surveillance cameras presented evidence that contradicted the initial claims. The authorities initially attempted to charge him with domestic violence, a crime in Kazakhstan that, due to lenient laws, does not carry severe penalties. This decision sparked significant criticism, particularly from the family of Sultanat. Her mother, in court, expressed her heartbreak over being unable to say goodbye to her daughter due to the severity of the injuries, while fearing that her son-in-law might face only a minor punishment, which shattered her faith in justice. In response to the public outrage, a new law was enacted in April 2024 to impose stricter penalties for domestic violence in Kazakhstan. Klondike pressured his brother, who was accused of being an accomplice, to provide false testimony to help him avoid consequences for his actions. However, Bakitson requested the court to protect him from Klondike, and this request was granted. Throughout the hearings, Klondike made numerous attempts to disparage his late wife, labeling her as inadequate, unbalanced, and an alcoholic who frequently cheated on him and provoked his anger. He tried to persuade the court that he acted out of passion that night and only struck his wife a couple of times, claiming those injuries were not fatal. He argued that all her other injuries were self-inflicted due to her frequent intoxication. He claimed that the bruises on her neck were caused by attempts to revive her, insisting that he was trying to help. But his brother, Bakitson, stated that Klondike prevented him from calling for medical assistance for Sultanat and was more interested in deleting footage from the cameras. Klondike then instructed him to take her cell phone back to their home to make it look like she was moving around the city, tricking her brother, Ibek, into believing she had returned to the apartment, even though he was monitoring her location. During the 9th hearing, he and his lawyer asked for the judge to step down, claiming they was biased. Their request was denied, and the judge continued overseeing the trial until a verdict was reached. On May 13, 2024, he was found guilty of serious charges, including inflicting bodily harm, torture, and murder of his common-law wife. He received a 20-year sentence for murder and an additional 7 years for battery and torture. In total, he was sentenced to 24 years in prison. His brother, Bakitson Bazanov, was also convicted, received a 4-year prison sentence for providing shelter. The court considered his lack of prior legal issues, his genuine remorse, and his full cooperation with the investigation. However, the family of the victim, Sultanat, expressed their dissatisfaction with the ruling. Her father had hoped for a life sentence for his former son-in-law, claiming that any lesser sentence would be unjust. Meanwhile, Sultanat's brother pointed out that a 24-year prison term for the 44-year-old defendant effectively amounted to a life sentence. The tragic story of Klondike Bishimbayev and Sultanat Nukhnova serves as a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic abuse and the complexities of relationships marred by control and violence. Despite Sultanat's initial dreams of independence and success, her life took a harrowing turn, ultimately leading to a heartbreaking end that shocked her loved ones and exposed the darker aspects of her husband's character. This narrative underscores the critical need for awareness, support systems, and interventions to protect individuals from the perilous cycle of abuse, highlighting the importance of listening to and believing victims before it's too late. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jason Corbett. Jason Corbett was a 39-year-old businessman from Limerick, Ireland, known for his cheerful, kind, and energetic personality. He had a twin brother named Wayne and a sister named Tracy. In 2003, when Jason was 27, he married Margaret Fitzpatrick. They soon had a son, Jack, and a daughter, Sarah, who they cherished deeply. Their family life was filled with happiness in Ireland, but that joy came to an abrupt and tragic end. In 2006, shortly after Sarah was born, Margaret, who had a long history of asthma, had a severe attack. She woke Jason up in the middle of the night, struggling to breathe. Despite Jason giving her medication and an inhaler, her condition worsened. In a panic, he called an ambulance, but sadly, Margaret passed away on the way to the hospital. After losing his wife, 30 years old Jason Corbett, a director of a small packaging company in Ireland, was left to care for his 2-year-old son and 3-month-old daughter alone. His friends noticed his deep grief and difficulty managing the loss. A year later, Jason decided to hire a nanny and housekeeper to help with his children. He connected with Molly Martins, a 25-year-old American woman, for the position. Molly arrived in Ireland from the United States in March 2008, and Jason's longtime friend picked her up at the airport. However, the friend immediately had doubts about Molly's suitability for the job, feeling she wasn't the right fit. Molly seemed younger than her age, wearing a flashy outfit with a bright coat with a fur collar, cowboy boots, lush curls, and heavy makeup. To that friend, Molly looked more like a theater actress than a babysitter. Molly Martins grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. She dropped out from Clemson University and decided to start a new life in Ireland. She quickly forms a close relationship with Jason's son and daughter, showing them tenderness and care. Jason's close friends soon noticed how he gradually recovered from the loss of his first wife, Margaret, he becoming more lively and engaged. Feelings developed between Jason and Molly, leading to a romantic relationship. The couple, along with Jack and Sarah, went on a vacation together. They enjoyed their time and grew closer, starting to plan their future together. 2 years later, on Valentine's Day 2010, Jason invited Molly to a cafe, where he gave her a ring and proposed. Overjoyed, Molly immediately began planning their wedding in America. She persuaded Jason to move to her home country, and he agreed. In 2011, he sold his house and transferred his job to the United States. The family settled in Davidson County, North Carolina, where Jason and Molly got married in a ceremony attended by many relatives and friends from both America and Ireland. After marrying Jason, Molly worked as a swimming instructor, but mainly focused on caring for Jason's children, Jack and Sarah. Jason held a managerial position in the United States. Although their life seemed happy at first, their marriage then began to deteriorate. This tension came to a head on August 1, 2015, when Molly's parents, Tom and Sharon Martins, visited the Corbett family home around 11 p.m. Jason greeted them in the driveway and helped with their luggage. Tom brought a baseball bat as a gift for Jack, Jason's son, who was out at a party with friends and did not receive the gift immediately. That evening, Jason, Molly, her parents, and Sarah had pizza for dinner. Jack returned home around 11 p.m., but Tom decided not to give him the baseball bat so late at night, planning to do so the next morning. After 11 p.m., the family went to bed. Molly and Jason slept in the master bedroom on the first floor, with Jack and Sarah in nearby rooms. Molly's parents stayed in the guest room on the second floor. In the early morning of August 2nd, at around 3 a.m., Tom Martins called 911. He reported that his son-in-law, Jason, had attacked Molly, and in self-defense, he hit Jason with a baseball bat. Tom urgently requested assistance, as Jason was unconscious and bleeding. The 911 dispatcher instructed Tom and Molly on performing CPR to try to revive Jason before help arrived. 10 minutes later, when police and ambulance services reached the scene, they found Molly outside near a car. She appeared distraught and in shock, though she wasn't crying. Inside the main bedroom, they found the lifeless body of 39-year-old Jason Corbett, with blood splattered on the bed, walls, and floor. Tom and Molly had blood-stained clothes, and Jason's body was marked with dried blood. Nearby, there was a bloody baseball bat, a large cobblestone, and an overturned lamp. Meanwhile, Jack and Sarah slept through the incident in their rooms. Tom and Molly admitted to being involved in Jason's death, claiming it was in self-defense, and were taken to the station for questioning. At the police station, 66-year-old Tom Martins, a retired FBI agent with 30 years of experience, reported that his son-in-law, Jason, was insane and frequently tormented his daughter. Tom said that Jason was intoxicated that evening. After everyone had gone to bed, Tom was awakened by screams and loud noises coming from the first floor. He quickly got out of bed, grabbed a baseball bat, and rushed downstairs. Upon entering the main bedroom, he saw Jason clutching Molly's throat with both hands. Tom shouted at Jason to let Molly go, but Jason turned to him and replied that he would kill her. Tom claimed that his instinct to protect his daughter arose immediately. He struck Jason with the baseball bat, but Jason seemed unaffected by the blow. Jason then tried to pull Molly into the bathroom and shut the door, but Tom intervened. Jason pushed Tom, causing him to fall, and his glasses flew off. At that moment, Tom feared for his life. Jason noticed the bat on the floor and reached for it, but Molly seized a stone, shouted at him not to touch her dad, and Molly struck he on the head with all her strength. Following this, Tom picked up the baseball bat again and continued to hit Jason until he collapsed onto the floor. During the interrogation, 32-year-old Molly repeatedly told the investigators the same story. She recounted that Sarah woke up in the night with night terrors, which startled Jason and made him very angry. In his anger, he attacked Molly, started strangling her, and threatened to kill her. Molly's father intervened to help her. Molly admitted to hitting her husband on the head with a heavy stone to save her father. When the police asked where she got the stone, Molly explained that it was on her bedside table. They had planned to paint the cobblestone with the children to create beautiful flower beds decorated with colorful stones. Molly couldn't remember how many times she struck her husband, only describing the incident as a real fight for her life. During the interrogation, Molly informed the investigators that she was still in pain from her husband's chokehold. They took photographs of her, capturing a red mark in the center of her neck. Later, the police compared these photos with those taken at the time of her arrest and found no red marks on her neck then. Molly admitted that the altercation with her husband had happened the day before the incident. During that fight, Jason had grabbed her arms and neck. Throughout the interrogation, she repeatedly complained of throat pain. Tom and Molly both claimed that Jason was mistreating Molly, but Jason's family disagreed. Tracy, Jason's sister, shared her observations about his marriage to Molly, noting unusual dynamics. Tracy remarked that Molly exerted significant control over Jason and she would become upset if things didn't go her way. Molly's unwillingness to engage with Jason's visiting relatives also raised concerns. Additionally, a friend of Molly's revealed that Molly had told people she was friends with Jason's first wife, Margaret, until Margaret died of cancer. This statement contradicted family accounts since it was known that Margaret had actually died of an asthma attack. Despite warnings and concerns from Jason's family and friends about Molly's unusual behavior, the couple went ahead with the wedding. This marked the start of a complicated and troubled marriage. At first, Molly and Jason's relationship seemed happy, with Molly developing a strong connection with Jason's children, Jack and Sarah, treating them like her own. However, as their first wedding anniversary approached in 2012, Jason mentioned wanting to move back to Ireland due to feeling unhappy living abroad. This marked the beginning of problems in their relationship. While Jack and Sarah called Molly their mother, Jason was hesitant about Molly adopting them legally. He wanted his children to preserve the memory of their biological mother, Margaret. During this period, Molly's behavior began to change noticeably. Jason became increasingly concerned about her mental health, suspecting that she might have a psychological disorder. He noticed a marked contrast between her initially kind character and her later behavior. He perceived she is more manipulative and controlling. Molly began to isolate Jason from his family and would often limit his phone conversations with them to just a few seconds. After the unexpected death of Margaret, Jason named his sister, Tracy, as the legal guardian for his children, Jack and Sarah, in case he passed away. Tracy knew that if anything happened to Jason, Molly would fiercely challenge the custody of the children. When Jason died, Tracy quickly went to North Carolina to apply for custody. Jack and Sarah expected to have a legal battle with Molly, who also wants custody of the child. During their troubled marriage, Molly consulted a lawyer to understand her rights regarding Jason's children if they divorced. Her lawyer advised her to document their disputes and gather evidence against Jason. As a result, Molly secretly recorded their conversations. In these recordings, Molly seemed disengaged, often ignoring Jason's repeated questions as he raised his voice. A close friend of Molly revealed that, although Molly rarely talked about her marital problems, she began expressing negative feelings about Jason after his death. Molly confided in her friend that Jason was controlling and abusive, claiming he forced her into intimate acts, verbally abused her, and treated her increasingly worse over time. Despite these claims, Molly did not report these incidents to the authorities. For days after Jason's tragic death, his children, Jack, 10, and Sarah, 8, were interviewed by a child welfare professional. During the interview, they discussed Molly and Jason's relationship. They said that their mother, Molly, was careful not to wake their father, Jason, as she was worried it might make him angry. Jack mentioned a cobblestone that was on the bedside table, explaining that they had brought it inside to protect it from the rain and planned to decorate it later. Regarding their parents' interactions, both Jack and Sarah described incidents where they saw their father physically attacking Molly. They recounted situations where Jason hit and pushed Molly and often snapped at her over trivial matters. After these revelations, Jack and Sarah were temporarily placed in the care of their biological aunt, Tracy. She traveled from Ireland and stayed at a hotel in North Carolina during the custody battle over Jack and Sarah. The autopsy of Jason revealed the grim details of his death. He died from a traumatic brain injury. Jason had been struck about 12 times on the head with both a baseball bat and a brick. These blows were concentrated in the same parts, causing severe tearing of his scalp from his skull and fracturing his skull. Notably, the medical examiner concluded that at least one of these strikes occurred after Jason had already died. The toxicology report provided further details, showing slightly higher than normal levels of alcohol in Jason's blood. Additionally, traces of trazodone, an antidepressant often prescribed for insomnia, were found in his body. Jason was buried in his hometown of Limerick, Ireland, next to his first wife, Margaret. Their shared tombstone features a wedding photo, symbolizing their lives and the bond they had. 16 days after Jason's death, his sister Tracy took his children, Jack and Sarah, to Ireland, away from their stepmother, Molly. She was shocked and devastated to learn that Jack and Sarah were in another country. She tried contacting them through phone calls and social media posts, hoping the messages would get through to the children. Molly and Tom consistently claimed that their actions against Jason were in self-defense, while the investigation into Jason's death continued. Tracy, however, suspected they had a different motive. Tracy believes that Molly knows Jason plans to leave her and that he will take the children with him. Tracy speculated that on the night of the incident, Jason told Molly about his decision, and Molly, fearing being left alone, reacted violently. In Ireland, Jack and Sarah received psychological support and slowly adapted to their new surroundings. 9 months after their father's tragic death, Jack and Sarah admitted that they had been forced to lie about domestic violence occurring at home. They revealed that Molly had manipulated them into making up stories about their father's behavior, threatening to cut off contact with them if they didn't comply. Contrary to Jack and Sarah's earlier claims, they clarified that their father had never been abusive towards Molly. During the investigation, detectives discovered Molly's past relationship with her ex-partner, Keith Megan. He shared many details about her earlier life. Keith and Molly met through a dating website and they felt affection for each other at first sight. They moved in together after just 6 weeks. Keith admired Molly's independence, cheerfulness, lightheartedness, and personality. Molly eventually told him about her struggle with bipolar disorder. Keith was not overly concerned about this, as Molly was on medication and generally well, except for some behavioral changes when she missed her doses. She wasn't violent or prone to outbursts but did have moments when, for example, she would insist that Keith not leave during quarrel. Molly would often spend long periods in the bathtub and then sit on the cold floor crying. Despite these challenges, they continued their relationship without plans to have children. Molly informed Keith that she was taking birth control pills, but then unexpectedly announced that she was pregnant. At this point, Keith, who was the family's only source of income, was already facing financial difficulties and felt unprepared for parenthood. When he found an unopened pack of contraceptives in Molly's wardrobe, he realized she had deceived him. Despite this, Keith proposed to Molly, who accepted happily. Molly continued taking her antidepressants and other medications, sometimes up to 16 pills a day, which worried Keith about the health of their unborn child. Molly once had a dream about losing the baby, and tragically, the next day, the hospital confirmed that the fetus had died. This incident further strained their relationship. Molly fell into deep mourning and was diagnosed with severe depression, as noted in her medical records. Her parents consoled her a lot, at the same time. They have a disdainful view of Keith, considering him a villain. In early 2008, Molly told Keith about her plan to go to Europe to work as a nanny. In March, she packed her things and left the apartment she shared with him. 10 days later, Molly called Keith to let him know she was in Ireland, had found a job, and everything was going well. After that, they never spoke or saw each other again. In October 2015, Keith received an email from a detective in North Carolina, where he learned about the unfortunate incident that had occurred. It turned out Molly had kept her relationship with Jason, engagement, and moved to another country a secret from everyone. Keith admitted that when he saw an interview of Tom and Molly, in which they described Jason as evil and scary, nevertheless, Keith did not find their story convincing and thought their expressions were fake. In January 2016, 6 months after Jason's death, Tom and Molly were unexpectedly charged with second-degree murder. By July 2017, 2 years after the incident, the father and daughter went to trial together. They argued that they acted in self-defense when Jason was killed. During the trial, Tom Martins said he did what any father would do: he defended his daughter. He felt it was a life-or-death situation and did everything he could to keep Molly and himself safe. Tom admitted to hitting Jason with a bat, and he stopping only when he felt Jason was no longer a threat. The prosecution argued that the force of the blows suggested strong hostility, not just an act of self-defense. An expert who analyzed the bloodstains deduced that some blows occurred when Jason's head was 30 to 50 centimeters from the ground, suggesting that Tom continued hitting him even when he was already down and no longer posed a danger. The bloodstains on the lower part of Molly's pajamas indicated her proximity to Jason during these blows. A long, light-colored hair, possibly Molly's, was found in Jason's hand, but it was not analyzed. The autopsy revealed defensive injuries on Jason's left hand, but none on his right, which he might have used to grab Molly by the neck. During the trial, Lieutenant Frank Young, responsible for documenting injuries on Tom and Molly on the night of the incident, testified. He recounted seeing Molly inflict injuries on her neck. He repeatedly told her to stop and noticed that besides the dried blood on her cheek, forehead, and hair, there were no other injuries. Similarly, Tom did not have any injuries on the front of his shirt, although there was blood on his watch dial, under his fingernails, and his glasses were unbroken. Paramedic Amanda Hackworth also testified that when she arrived and examined Jason's body, his torso was already cold with dried blood patches. This conflicted with Molly's claim that they had immediately called 911 after Jason lost consciousness and collapsed. The trial revealed that Jason had a life insurance policy, with Molly as the beneficiary. It was also disclosed that Jason often sent money to Molly's parents. For instance, in 2011, he sent $50,000 to Tom, supposedly for wedding expenses. During the trial, a neighbor testified that he spent the evening with Jason, drinking beer from about 3:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., and described Jason as very relaxed. He saw Tom and his wife arrive at the Jason residence, where Jason greeted them and helped carry heavy bags from their car into the house. His interactions with his in-laws were also described as calm. The court heard testimony from a nurse who had met with the couple before the tragic. She stated that she prescribed trazodone to Molly just days before the incident. On July 30, 2015, Jason visited the hospital, expressing concerns about his frequent dizziness, tension, and sudden anger. After 9 days of testimonies, discussions, and reviewing crime scene photos, the jury delivered a verdict in just 3 hours. Molly and her father, Tom Martins, were found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 and 25 years in prison, respectively. The case is not completely over, although justice has been served to the guilty party. Just an hour after the jury delivered its verdict, a juror accidentally revealed outside the court that they had discussed Jason's case before the formal deliberation period, which is a significant violation of legal protocol. Following this revelation, the defense quickly requested to overturn the conviction, citing the juror's misconduct. However, the trial judge rejected this request. A year later, the defense appealed to the appellate court, pointing out several investigative errors. One issue was the blood stains on Tom's shorts. The prosecution suggested these stains, assumed to be Jason's blood but never tested, indicated Tom was standing over Jason during the assault. The prosecutor argued that testing every blood spot was impractical and unnecessary. The defense also highlighted the importance of Jack and Sarah's initial statements. Jack and Sarah had initially claimed their father was abusive towards Molly and expressed fear of him. The defense argued that the siblings later retracted their statements, admitting they lied due to pressure from professionals to change their testimony. On February 4, 2020, the North Carolina Court of Appeals decided that Tom Martins and Molly should receive a new trial. This decision was later upheld by the North Carolina Supreme Court. As a result, both were released on a $200,000 bond while awaiting the new trial. They were required to surrender their passports and were prohibited from any contact with Jack and Sarah. Currently, Jason Corbett's case has been moved to Forsyth County, North Carolina, to continue with the legal proceedings. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Diana Duva. Diana Duva was born in 1988 in Moldova. When she was 13, she moved to the United States to join her mother, who had immigrated earlier, married an American, and helped Diana relocate. They settled in Vero Beach, a resort town in sunny Florida, known for its white sandy beaches and warm Atlantic waters. At first, Diana didn't speak any English, but then she quickly enrolled in a local school. She learned the language swiftly. Within just 2 months, she was speaking freely, and after a few years, her accent became very similar to other native speakers. Diana developed a good relationship with her stepfather, Will, who became like a second father to her. She also made friends easily, as she was sociable and approachable. After graduating, Diana was faced with the problem of choosing her future goals. Knowing she wanted to dedicate her life to helping others, she enrolled in a nursing program at college. In 2011, she earned her nursing degree and secured a job at the oncology department of the Sebastian River Medical Center. Here she is highly appreciated by everyone, and her dedicated care has received many compliments from patients. In 2012, Diana met 30-year-old Michael Jones at a local bar. Initially, they were just friends, but their relationship soon became romantic. Friends and family began to question whether their feelings for each other were genuine or if it was merely infatuation. Michael showed interest in Diana, while Diana simply accepted his flirtation without much enthusiasm. Although he worked in asset management at a bank and had graduated from a University of Miami law school, but Michael lacked a sense of security. He is always polite, neatly dressed, and comes from a good family. This makes him an ideal choice to build a family and live together. Because of this, a couple of months after they met, Diana moved into his apartment at his request. Their relationship started off warm and seemingly happy. They spent almost all their time together. However, this closeness eventually led to issues. Diana's friends noticed that she sometimes appeared restless in their company. It seemed as though she was trying to hide from Michael, avoiding letting him see her with her friends or even her car. Although Diana's friends sensed that something was wrong, but she did not share any details about her relationship, leading them to suspect that Michael may be limiting her communication with friends. Before the tragic incident, Diana had a disagreement with her boyfriend, Michael. On April 30th, 2014, a neighbor called 911 after hearing them argue for about an hour. Michael was shouting loudly, but there were no signs of physical violence. Concerned that the situation could escalate, the neighbor requested police intervention. When officers arrived, Michael answered the door and explained that the noise was due to rough sex that Diana wanted to try. Diana, visibly upset in her pajamas, stood quietly with her eyes downcast and tears on her face, which the police noticed. She didn't speak up in front of Michael and insisted to the officers that everything was fine. However, before concluding their conversation, she asked the police to wait, gathered her belongings, said goodbye to Michael, and left with them to the station. Later, Diana confided in a friend that Michael had not only yelled at her that night but had attempted to control her for hours. When his efforts failed, he grabbed her by the throat and began to strangle her. Terrified, she feared for her life. Thankfully, the neighbor called the police when realized the situation was dangerous. At the police station, 26-year-old Diana chose not to report Michael's mistreatment behavior to the police. She felt that her relationship with Michael was over and believed she shouldn't worry about it. Although the police persuade Diana to write a statement in her defense, but she refuses because she doesn't want to ruin Michael's life. Diana decided move to live with her mother to distance herself from him. However, 32-year-old Michael continued to stalk her, sending texts and insisting on meetings as if nothing was wrong. On Thursday, June 19, 2014, Diana was out with friends but left to meet Michael. Her friends last saw her when she left a bar with him at 1:30 a.m. on June 20th. At 1:45 a.m., she texted her mother, Lena Andrews, to say she wouldn't be coming home. That was the last anyone heard from her. After that, she stopped communicating with her family and friends. Although Diana had previously had a strained relationship with Michael, witnesses said that they seemed to be enjoying each other's company that day and showed no signs of conflict. It appeared they had reconciled, but after her disappearance, some people recalled that she sometimes seemed upset when talking to him. Diana spoke to her mother, Lena, every day, so when her mother didn't hear from her and her calls went unanswered, her mother immediately grew concerned. This worry led her to imagine worst-case scenarios. She reached out to Diana's friends, but they didn't know her whereabouts either. When Diana still hadn't returned by the evening of June 20th, her mother contacted the police to express her concerns. The officers took Lena's statement and began an investigation. On June 21st, the police attempted to locate Diana by tracking her phone, but it was disconnected and useless. Their next step was to visit her ex-boyfriend Michael, who was believed to be the last person with Diana before she went missing. However, no one answered the door when the police arrived. He was not home, and all the witnesses, Diana's friends who were at the bar with her that night, were questioned simultaneously. But this led to conflicting stories, because they developed several different theories about what happened that evening. On the same day, the police obtained a warrant to search the apartment of Diana's boyfriend, Michael, but first, they needed to return to the station to complete the necessary paperwork. When the officers returned, they found Diana's mother and stepfather waiting in a car near the apartment complex. Lena Andrews, Diana's mother, was distraught. She was crying and desperate to get into the apartment to find her daughter. As time passed without any contact from her mother's anxiety grew. Lena was convinced that Michael was involved in Diana's disappearance. The police asked her when she last heard from her daughter. Lena revealed that at around 1:45 a.m., she received a message from Diana, which said she wouldn't be coming home. This message was written in Russian, the language they usually use to communicate, and it was significant because Michael did not speak Russian and could not have sent it. After Diana went missing, her mother, Lena, called Michael. He tried to reassure her that Diana was with him and that she was safe. However, when Lena asked to speak to Diana directly, Michael made excuses, claiming she was asleep and that he was not at home. His words sounded fake, and Lena didn't trust him. She insisted that Diana call her back as soon as Michael returned, as she was very worried. Instead, Michael stopped answering calls altogether. Lena began to suspect that Michael was involved in Diana's disappearance and might have harmed her. Desperate for help, she reached out to the police, who assured her they would do everything they could to find her daughter, Diana. The detectives received photographs taken by a friend Diana's on the night before she went missing. These images showed clear strangulation marks on her neck. These injuries occurred following an argument that a neighbor overheard. The friend had tried repeatedly to convince Diana to report Michael to the police, but she refused, asking her friend to help her collect her belongings as she believed the relationship was over. Afterwards, Diana moved in with her parents but chose not to inform them about the incident. Her mother remained unaware of the attack, thinking they had merely had some disagreements, although she did have her suspicions about Michael. Despite this, Michael did not leave Diana alone and began to harass her. He continued sending messages, as if he didn't understand that their relationship was really over. 48 hours after Diana disappeared, the police obtained a search warrant and entered Michael's apartment, hoping to find her or some evidence about her whereabouts. However, they did not locate any of her belongings or any clues. The next step was to search for Michael Jones. Witnesses reported that he showed up at work just 12 hours after Diana stopped communicating. He also withdrew $2,500 in cash from his bank account, claiming he was unwell and needed to leave. For several days, no one could locate Michael. His whereabouts were unknown. It appeared he had gone into hiding, raising suspicions about his involvement in the disappearance of Diana. Detectives began to delve deeper into Michael's background. They discovered that prior to the move to Vero Beach, he had been convicted of stalking his ex-girlfriend under serious circumstances. Investigators reviewed the details of that case. In 2012, when Michael lived near Fort Lauderdale, his ex-girlfriend reported him to the police. She claimed that after breaking up with him, he threatened to end his life. When this manipulation did not succeed, he physically attacked her. Michael used a gun in an attempt to force her to stay. His earlier girlfriends had managed to escape by calling the police. The ex-girlfriend filed a report against Michael, leading to his arrest. He cooperated with the investigation and confessed to his actions, including making threats of murder. Consequently, he received a suspended sentence of 5 years. Then, Michael was in a new relationship with Diana. He was restricted from leaving the Vero Beach area if no his supervisor's permission. However, he vanished, and the police were unable to locate him. he could have been detained for violating the terms of his suspended sentence. The parents of Diana were shocked to learn of Michael's suspended sentence. They had no idea their daughter was involved with a criminal who had a history of attacking and threatening former girlfriends. Meanwhile, detectives concentrated on Michael, believing he had more information than he shared with Diana's mother during their phone call. The police initiated a thorough analysis and tracking of signals from Michael's communications. They also placed Michael's and Diana's cars on a list of vehicles to be located. After reviewing cellular signals, they pinpointed Michael's phone to an area in Fort Pierce, about a 25-minute drive from Vero Beach. Patrols were dispatched to search for the cars of Michael and Diana, focusing on a gold Honda and a black Nissan. By the evening of the same day, they discovered Michael's car parked at the Hampton Inn Hotel near the communication tower. The police learned that Michael had checked into a room just 24 hours after Diana disappeared. Michael tried to keep his identity a secret while staying at a hotel, but he ended up leaving the information when he had to pay for the room at the front desk. The hotel management was told not to disclose that he was staying there for the next 2 nights. He also barred any phone calls to his room and turned off his own phone. When the police arrive, they believe they may find Diana alive, with her kidnapper, Michael, in the hotel room. After receiving the room key from the front desk, the police entered the room. Michael was shocked when he saw the police and immediately claimed he had no idea where Diana was. The detective pressed him to share any information he had, but he continued to deny everything. Since they couldn't gather any information, Michael was detained for violating his probation. Still, the detective had no leads on Diana's whereabouts or her car. It was discovered that during Michael's time on the run, he had been using a disposable phone, making it nearly impossible to trace his communications. The investigation continued as detectives identified the location where the disposable phone was purchased, the Wall store. They requested and reviewed the store's CCTV footage to find Diana or her vehicles. Despite the poor quality, they spotted a car similar to Diana's vehicle in the footage, which was recorded shortly before she was reported missing. In the video, Michael exits the car, makes a purchase at the store, and then drives away, while Diana is not seen. Although this did not provide any leads, it led the police to a more detailed analysis of phone calls, revealing that Michael occasionally used his main phone. He turned it on briefly before switching it off again. One of the phone's pings was detected near Melbourne, about an hour's drive from where Michael was hiding. Investigators alerted the local police to check this area. The Melbourne police joined the search for the Diana's missing car, and their efforts paid off. Just 30 minutes later, they found Diana's car in the parking lot of a Florida Publix shopping center. Investigators quickly arrived to the scene after learning about the discovery. In June 2014, just 3 days after Diana went missing, state police found her body in the trunk of her own car. This led to the case being reclassified from a disappearance to a murder investigation. The autopsy revealed that Diana had been strangled and suffered blunt force trauma to her head, indicating she had been violently attacked before her death. It was widely believed that Michael was responsible for bringing her to that location. CCTV footage captured him driving her car, and his phone records showed he was in the area at the time. When investigators examined Michael's call history, they found that the only call he made while in the vicinity was to order a taxi. Around 8 a.m., he called for a ride and was picked up from a nearby parking lot. The taxi driver was found, and interrogation, he recognized Michael from a photo. The driver recalled that Michael was wearing a red hoodie and sat in the front passenger seat, where they chatted briefly. According to the driver, Michael claimed he had come with a friend, but after they had a fight, he left alone. 2 days after the Diana's body was discovered, police gathered enough evidence to charge Michael Jones with the first-degree murder of Diana. However, Michael maintained his innocence, necessitating further investigation to establish his guilt. As the police investigated his background, they discovered that he did not fit the usual profile of a criminal. He was educated, intelligent, and held a respected job at a bank, making him a valued member of the community. Many people were skeptical about his capacity for murder. He frequently participated in local charity events and was an advocate for an organization working against domestic violence, where he had a positive reputation. Friends and co-workers praised him, claiming he was one of the most honest and trustworthy individuals they knew. They expressed that they trusted him as much as their own family members. The management at the banks where Michael worked regarded him as one of their best employees and a key team member. They received numerous letters of appreciation acknowledging his contributions. Since he started at the bank, Michael brought in many partners, leading to multimillion-dollar deals. While he enjoyed a good reputation in the bank, it was overshadowed by the fact that he was a convicted criminal serving a suspended sentence. Michael was a master manipulator, able to deceive not only ordinary people but also the bank's management, which had a security service that meticulously monitored employees. They were completely unaware of Michael's criminal past. As the police began to investigate him, they discovered that his history was filled with inconsistencies. Different people shared conflicting stories about him. Some claimed he was a former baseball player, others said he was an adopted child from a wealthy family, while some believed he had inherited a fortune and was raised in a family connected to a former U.S. president. They also believed that Michael lived in a luxurious penthouse and drove a Porsche, even though he himself had driven a Honda for 10 years. Although the investigation identified Michael's previous girlfriends and detectives spoke to them, police now saw a clear pattern in his behavior. At first, he seemed charming, like a prince on a white horse, winning the girls over with his best qualities. The girls were thrilled to be with someone so promising. However, over time, he revealed a darker side. He became controlling and jealous, dictating how they should interact with others and monitoring their communications. He manipulated multiple girlfriends simultaneously, maintaining these relationships for extended periods. Michael was not only a skilled manipulator but also a cruel individual and a pathological liar. Most of the girls were fortunate. They avoided persecution and found ways to break up with Michael without suffering serious consequences. Michael lied about being poor when he entered college, but in reality, he came from a wealthy family. His lies about his background grew more serious after his parents cut off their financial support. He attempted to manipulate them, but it was unsuccessful. While studying, he falsely claimed he was fighting cancer to gain sympathy from his classmates. But he couldn't provide any medical evidence to support his claims. The prosecution faced a difficult choice: pursue the death penalty or settle for life in prison. They did not consult Diana's mother about this decision. Choosing the death penalty was particularly risky. If even one juror disagreed, it could put the whole case in danger. Additionally, such cases can take years to resolve. However, Diana's mother was adamant that Michael should face the death penalty. Refusing to back down, the prosecutor stated his intention to seek capital punishment. In November 2019, Michael's trial began. The prosecution described his relationship with Diana as toxic, describing it as a cruel attempt at control that lasted around 6 months. The climax of this abuse was an attack on Diana. The prosecution presented clear evidence of Michael's aggressive behavior, including photos taken by a friend, which showed marks on Diana's neck. While the prosecution could not confirm the exact conversation between Diana and Michael at the bar that night, Diana's friend reported that she planned to end her relationship with Michael, but wanted to do so in a friendly manner to preserve their friendship. Afterward, Diana planned a short trip to visit a friend in a nearby city. She mentioned her plans to Michael, which likely angered him. Tragically, this led to her demise. Diana's body exhibited multiple injuries and bruises, indicating she had suffered severe abuse at Michael's hands. The prosecution argued that Michael took Diana to his home and assaulted her violently. He understood that if she managed to escape, she would probably go to the police, leading to a long prison sentence for him. So, he couldn't let her go. Michael killed Diana by strangling her, leaving characteristic handprints on her neck. Afterward, he placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove her out of town. He then took a taxi and hid in a hotel. Fortunately, he left behind clues that led to his capture and the resolution of the case. The forensic expert admitted that they couldn't determine the time of death accurately because the body had decomposed significantly in the heat, complicating the investigation. However, upon closer inspection of his apartment, small but distinct traces of blood were found in the garage. These traces were located where the sliding door meets the ground, suggesting that he loaded her body into the car at his home. The defense argued that the prosecution failed to clearly establish what happened in Michael's house, claiming that it was unreasonable to consider the murder premeditated and that the incident should be classified as an accident. The lawyer also presented strong arguments for a reduced sentence, such as the attitudes of neighbors, friends, and acquaintances towards Michael, along with Michael's good reputation at work. The court heard testimonies within a week. Afterward, the jury went to deliberate and reached a decision surprisingly quickly, in just 45 minutes. They unanimously found Michael Jones guilty of first-degree murder. However, the jury did not have a collective agreement on the verdict. Diana's mother, crying, confronted Michael and asked how he could kill someone he professed to love. Even so, Michael showed no remorse or emotion during the trial. Even as the court prepared to announce the verdict, he remained emotionless. The prosecution was greatly disappointed when Michael Jones received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Mario Biondo. Mario Biondo was born in Italy, one of three sons of Santino d'Alessandria and Giuseppe Biondo. The family was known for its friendliness and generosity. From an early age, Mario was very creative and loved photography. He showed his talent and knowledge, eventually becoming a member of the technical support team in television. Throughout his life, Mario was active in volleyball, participating in many team competitions. This experience taught him valuable lessons about team spirit, trust, and accepting defeat. His good looks and charm attracted many admirers. Then Mario met Raquel Sanchez Silva, a talented young woman from Spain. After graduating from journalism in 1994, she aspired to become a television presenter. Raquel benefited from her mother Matilda's connections in the industry, but her intelligence and talent were already known to everyone. The couple met in Honduras in 2011, where Mario worked as a cameraman and Raquel was a presenter on the reality TV show Celebrity Island. Raquel quickly fell in love with him. According to her friends, she expressed her feelings openly, which was very unusual for her. Fortunately, Mario felt the same way and they started dating. Despite the age difference, everyone admired this smart and talented couple, and they became local celebrities, with the public closely following their lives. In June 2012, Mario and Raquel got married in Sicily. The wedding was a classic, beautiful event by Italian standards, celebrated with grandeur for several days. Locals believed that such a wedding would lead to a happy and long-lasting marriage. Unfortunately, this did not happen. Just a year later, on May 29, 2013, a tragic event occurred. Mario and Raquel had a small argument, a common problem for young couples, but they resolved it through reconciliation. At that time, the couple had been married for almost a year and were living in Raquel's apartment in central Madrid. Raquel needed to go to her hometown of Plasencia for work, so at around 8:30 p.m. that same evening, They said goodbye to each other in the garage before she left. The trip had been planned in advance and everything seemed to be going according to schedule. After Raquel left, Mario was alone at home. Mario made 3 phone calls. One was to his sister Emanuela, who lived in Sicily. He shared his ambitious plans for future television projects, which included preparing a new show and eventually traveling around the world with Raquel to create a travel blog. He also made 2 other calls, one of which may have been to a drug dealer. That evening, the Mario went to an ATM near his home at around 10 p.m., where he withdrew 110 euros. However, the money was never found in his home, suggesting that he had spent it all. About an hour later, a neighbor saw Mario at the entrance to his apartment building. She noticed that he was behaving unusually and ignoring her, which was out of character for him as he was usually very polite. He seemed upset, but there was no immediate cause for concern. Mario called his wife, and they talked until midnight, then continued their conversation via text messages. They mainly discussed their current situation, especially their difficulties conceiving. Raquel, 40, desperately wanted a baby but was unable to get pregnant, which worried both of them. Mario suspects that he may be infertile due to a disease he previously suffered from. Later, the Mario spoke with his brother Andrea about several exciting new projects he had planned for the future. Their conversations on social media and over the phone continued until 1 a.m., when Mario cleverly said goodnight to his wife and told her he was going to sleep. However, he had no intention of resting. Instead, he spent the next hour browsing various adult websites. He then used Google Maps to locate the nearest strip club to his home. He arrived at the club at 2:53 a.m. Once there, he paid for 3 drinks with his card but did not request any additional services. After spending some time at the club, he returned home. Once at home, he went back to adult websites. Around 6 a.m., he made his final entry on the computer, which contained a rough budget for a new television show he was preparing. After that, he checked his messenger again for any unread messages, but there were none. The next morning, Mario was unresponsive. Neither his family nor his wife could reach him. They assumed he was either resting or busy with the new projects he had mentioned, so no one thought to check on him. At around 3:30 p.m., Raquel, his wife, received a call from his workplace inquiring about his whereabouts. The producer was concerned because Mario hadn't shown up for filming. This was unusual for him, especially since it was the day of one of his favorite programs, Kitchen. Mario took his work seriously and would never let his team down or miss filming without a good reason. When Raquel realized she couldn't reach him by phone or through social media, she became worried and called their worker, Wilma. Raquel asked Wilma to check on him. Around 5 p.m., Wilma arrived at the apartment while on the phone with Raquel. When she opened the door, she was horrified by what she saw and screamed loudly. She quickly ran outside because she found a lifeless body inside. Wilma stopped a passing police car and reported her horrifying discovery. Other rescue teams arrived within 10 minutes. The officers found the body of a 31-year-old man, dressed in pajamas, with a scarf wrapped around his neck. The other end was tied to a shelf in the hallway. It appeared that Mario ended his own life. The police carried out a brief investigation and found that the doors and windows were intact, indicating there had been no forced entry by any outsiders. There were no clear signs of a struggle on the Mario's body, only a few bruises were present that did not appear to result from defensive actions. All this pointed towards the ended his own life. Raquel learned of the tragedy and quickly completed her duties before returning home. She informed the police that he sometimes engaged in strangulation during their sexual activities, suggesting that this could have led to the tragedy. This information interested the police, who considered this angle. Although there was no apparent reason to dismiss it, the investigation proceeded cautiously without jumping to conclusions. Raquel requested that the body be cremated as soon as possible, but her request was denied because the medical examiner needed more time to analyze the body and determine its condition. On June 1, 2013, Mario's family filed an appeal challenging the findings of the inquest. They believe that Mario cannot end his own life. He was determined and had ambitious plans for the future, which he was proud of. His life seemed to be going well, and they felt there was no reason for him to end it. Additionally, Mario's family opposed cremation and insisted on burial instead. The tragic event has attracted public attention as all those allegedly involved are well-known figures in Spain. Raquel shared a post on social media mourning her husband's death, describing him as a cheerful and ambitious person. However, she raised the possibility that his death could have been the result of his own life or an accident. Raquel also alluded to potential issues with sex addiction and asked friends and supporters not to jump to conclusions and wait for the final investigation. A forensic expert concluded that Mario's death was likely an accident, noting that he had stopped using his phone around 6 a.m., which was the estimated time of death. Consequently, the case regarding Mario Biondo's death was closed, and no further investigations were planned. Mario was buried in his hometown in Italy on June 6, 2013, with his Raquel and family in attendance. In a noble gesture, Raquel chose to forego her husband's inheritance in favor of his family. Afterward, the Raquel began to withdraw from those around her. She moved to a different apartment and sold the one she had shared with her husband. Soon after, she voluntarily resigned from her television position. Those who interacted with her during this time noted that she appeared calm and composed, never showing signs of sadness or regret. Seemingly unaffected by recent events, she only briefly withdrew from the public eye. On June 27, 2013, she returned to television, quickly resuming her role as a presenter. She explained that returning to work had helped her try to forget and find comfort. Raquel, who quickly recovered, began a relationship with a new man, a businessman who had previously given an interview on Rakita. Mario's relatives were puzzled by her behavior, as it seemed that she had completely forgotten about her husband. Just a few weeks ago, she had been deeply in love with him, and her sudden change in mood raised many questions and suspicions. Mario's relatives were concerned about the circumstances surrounding his death, so they asked the police to conduct a further investigation. They specifically requested that his wife be questioned first. The police initially declined, stating that the case was closed. However, 7 months later, in December 2013, they agreed to reopen the investigation. Mario's body was exhumed, and the police reinterrogated all the witnesses. Additionally, the family hired 2 independent experts because they believed the initial forensic expert had erred in his findings. The new investigation used computer modeling to examine the details of Mario's death. Analysis showed that his posture was inconsistent with one's own life. He could not have been in that position to suffocate. The position of his legs did not match the marks on his neck or the type of knot used on his scarf, suggesting the scene had been staged. It was possible that someone else assisted him in staging it. Police began to consider the possibility that his death was a homicide. The case was reopened and the investigation continued. However, things took a different turn, made more complicated by the fact that so much time had passed since Mario's death that crucial evidence was lost. News spread quickly through the community and people began demanding answers about Mario's suspicious death. Back home, under pressure from the family, the local police also launched their own investigation, based on the results of an autopsy by independent forensic experts, and they began to suspect that this could be a homicide. Italian police traveled to Spain to conduct an autopsy and interview people close to Mario, including Raquel. They suspected she was hiding something due to her inconsistent statements. Police noticed several photos from the crime scene showing an ashtray full of cigarette butts and several empty beer cans, suggesting that the Mario had company that night. Surprisingly, no one checked for fingerprints or DNA on these items. Furthermore, no suicide note was found, adding to the mystery. Italian police also discovered that nearly 1,000 gigabytes of data had been deleted from the Mario's computer. Unfortunately, they were unable to recover this data. Mario's mother speculated that Raquel may have deleted the sensitive photos and videos that Raquel had discovered shortly before Mario's death. This further raises suspicions that Raquel had other secrets that she feared would be revealed. Mario's family believes that Mario wasn't just visiting adult websites or strip clubs that night, he was looking for his wife there. They think he may have discovered something disturbing about her that could have motivated someone to harm him. It was discovered that the password on Mario's computer had been changed after his death and the files had been deleted shortly after, timing that coincided with the day of his funeral when Mario's entire family, including Raquel, were at the cemetery. This raises the question, who could have done this? It turns out that Raquel had a brother who was a computer expert. He left during the funeral and may have done this at her request. In May 2014, Raquel again attracted public attention when she was invited to appear on a show about her husband's death. However, she refused to participate and did not comment on the incident. However, she appeared before journalists in September 2014. She then accused her ex-mother-in-law of harassment. In response, Mario's family accused Raquel of involvement in his death. They believed she was responsible, but Raquel denied any wrongdoing and there was no evidence against her. Despite the accusations, Raquel continued her life. She married in September 2015 and gave birth to twins after undergoing hormone therapy to help her conceive. The father of her children is a businessman she met on television. Raquel no longer thinks about her ex-husband, while Mario's mother continues to search for evidence of Raquel's guilt. At one point, she even went to extremes. She released photos of the actual crime scene taken by the police. In these photos, Mario was in an unnatural position and showed no signs of life. Along with the photos, a forensic report from independent experts was included, stating that a person could not suddenly leave life in such a way. The photos showed clear contradictions with the initial police reports that were intended to quickly close the case after his death. Specifically, the reports mentioned that Mario's legs were bent, but in fact, his body was hanging with his legs straight. This move caused considerable public outrage, leading to increased police scrutiny, after which they initiated a more thorough investigation. In 2016, the intense media attention surrounding Raquel's trial led to a second autopsy conducted by a state medical examiner. This expert determined that Mario's death was a result of his own choice to end his life. Consequently, Raquel won the legal case, and the court ordered Mario's mother to pay her €3,000 for emotional damages. Following this, Mario's mother was placed under house arrest for 8 days. This incident fueled rumors and received extensive media coverage, culminating in a televised appeal that stressed the idea that Mario had chosen to end his life, reportedly due to his deep worries about infertility and his inability to have children with the woman he loved. As a result, the case was closed once again in Spain. The Italian police decided to close the case due to procedural constraints and the inability to conduct further investigations after so many years. They also criticized the Spanish police for the way they handled the investigation into Mario's death. However, the investigation did not end there. In 2017, a new expert, Spanish expert Luis Duca, was brought into the forensic department. After a thorough analysis of the circumstances surrounding Mario's death, he concluded that Mario could not have committed end one's own life voluntarily. Luis Duca's opinion was highly valued because he had 15 years of experience investigating complex cases. The forensic expert stated that he thoroughly reviewed the dossier and all materials available to the police. His analysis was funded by Mario's family, and it confirmed their suspicions about the circumstances of Mario's death. Notably, there were no indicators of strangulation, such as small hemorrhages in the eyes. He believed that Mario could not have suffered a neck fracture from the height of his fall. Nor could he have died from suffocation since his heels touched the ground. For death by cerebral ischemia to occur, a tight noose would need to be placed around the neck. However, the scarf used did not adequately secure the back of the head and only partially surrounded it. The knot was so loose that Mario's head could easily have slipped out of the scarf. The pale blue color of the body suggests that Mario died lying down. There were no signs of convulsions at the time of death, as none of the items, including the figurine or picture frame, fell off the shelf, which would have occurred if there had been any violent movement. There was an unexplained fresh wound to the left of Mario's temple. The marks on Mario's neck did not match the scarf. He had clearly been strangled with another object, such as a rope or cable. The scratches on his neck could not be attributed to gravity alone. Additionally, the position in which the body was found raised significant questions. There were many more plausible ways for a person to die that would have been more comfortable. Why was he placed in this very awkward pose? According to police reports, the level of rigor mortis and the extremely low body temperature suggested that Mario died much earlier than 6 a.m., likely just after midnight. The theory of sexual activity was deemed unconvincing by experts, as Mario was fully clothed and there were no signs of any sexual manipulation involving his body. Experts used specialized software and obtained details about the metal shelf where Mario's body was found. Their analysis indicated that if he had died from hanging, he would have fallen to the floor. This led them to conclude that he must have been strangled in a different location, and the hanging was staged. Consequently, Mario's previously embalmed body was exhumed. During this examination, they discovered a significant hematoma in his brain, which suggested he had suffered a severe blow from a blunt object, information that had been missing from the original autopsy reports. It raised questions about how such crucial details could have been overlooked, giving the impression that they might have been intentionally concealed. Alongside the release of this data, Raquel revised her statement. Initially, she had said that her husband used strangulation as a sexual game since his youth, suggesting his death was either accidental or end one's own life driven by personal issues. Now, she indicated that her husband might have been with someone he trusted while she was away, and that this person could have harmed him. She also speculated that her husband may have consumed alcohol or drugs, rendering him unable to defend himself. A new account emerged, stating that Mario allowed an acquaintance into their home, who then struck him forcefully on the head. This blow with a blunt object knocked him unconscious, after which a scarf was wrapped around his neck and used to strangle him. There were no signs of a struggle because he likely didn't have time to react. Following the attack, the assailant allegedly staged to end one's own life and calmly left the apartment. This explanation addressed why there were no indications of a break-in or any unknown people entering the home. In October 2018, writer Paolo Gentili released the book The Death of a Good Guy, the incredible story of Mario Biondo in Italy. He collaborated closely with Mario's mother, a key figure in this challenging case, as she seeks to defend her son's honor and discover the truth about his murder. The book portrays Raquel Sanchez Silva as manipulative and labels her a liar. On November 5, 2018, after a third autopsy was authorized by Italian authorities, the Anatomical Institute at the Palermo Polyclinic was tasked with conducting the examination. They performed X-rays and a CT scan, which included the participation of independent experts hired by Mario's family. In 2019, Mario's parents filed a complaint with the police investigator who was present at the scene of the crime. During the investigation in 2013, it was discovered that he had seriously violated his duties on several occasions. The police officer was convicted in May 2020, and both the doctor who performed the autopsy and his assistant also faced consequences. The investigation into Mario's death was reopened, revealing new information about the events surrounding the case. Many forensic science experts were brought in to investigate the case. However, a major problem arose because many of the documents used in the original investigation were no longer considered reliable, and some evidence was ignored when the investigation was suspended. One of the most significant violations in this case involved abuse of office. It was demonstrated that the prosecutor's office allowed modifications to PDF files containing evidence of social media interactions and visits to specific websites, which the police had originally reported. This evidence suggested that Mario did not visit any adult websites, nor did he contact a dealer to purchase drugs on the night of his death. All of this was intentionally fabricated. An investigation into Mario's internet connections that night revealed that 2 devices were connected to the apartment's Wi-Fi simultaneously, despite him being home alone. Furthermore, there was no evidence indicating that Mario had ever left the house. His supposed visits to the ATM and the strip club were based solely on the activation of his bank card in those locations, but it was not confirmed that he was the one using it. Mario, who used the cards, appeared to be the target of a malicious effort to damage his reputation. He was allegedly portrayed as a pervert and a substance abuser. However, if he was truly a pervert, why did he only pay for drinks at the strip club and not take advantage of the services offered? Unfortunately, recordings from the ATM and street surveillance cameras had been deleted over time, making it impossible to confirm who withdrew money from the ATM or who was present at the club. It was also puzzling why Mario, as a public figure often in the limelight, would choose to visit a questionable strip club and use his card there when he could have easily paid in cash to keep his visit discreet. A toxicology report on the Mario showed only a low level of alcohol in his system, with no other drugs present. A neighbor who saw Mario that evening began to doubt it was really him. The next day, it was revealed that Mario had been planning to ride his motorcycle and had checked the weather forecast. This raised the question, why would he do this if he was contemplating end one's own life? These inconsistencies prompted further inquiries. A witness was found, a waiter from the restaurant across from the house where the incident occurred. He reported that, from the very morning, all visitors spoke about something bad happening there and that police cars or an ambulance had arrived. However, how could outsiders know that the tragedy had occurred when the family's housekeeper discovered Mario's body after 4 p.m.? Despite new discoveries, several factors slowed down the investigation. First, most evidence had become outdated. Second, reconstructing the sequence of events was unreliable. Third, law enforcement officers initially involved made many errors and did not follow protocols, which required the case to be restarted. Due to the time lost, continuing the investigation became very challenging. In August 2022, the Spanish justice system decided to close the case because of insufficient evidence. However, the family of the Mario strongly opposed this decision, appealing to various authorities. Their persistence paid off, resulting in the case being reopened and classified as a murder in March 2023. The Mario family traveled to Spain again to gather more information about the circumstances surrounding Mario's death and to demonstrate their belief that Raquel was involved in the crime. They felt confident that no one else could have committed it. In the weeks leading up to Mario's deaths, the couple's relationship had significantly worsened due to issues related to pregnancy, and they were close to getting a divorce. The Raquel likely wanted to avoid sharing Mario's assets, particularly after he discovered a damaging secret about her and took money from her, which could also have motivated her to commit the crime. Notably, she insisted on the cremation rite after seeing Mario's body, which raised suspicions that she was trying to hide something. Only Raquel and the morning workers had keys to the apartment, but no one believed that an elderly worker could have killed Mario. The deceased's family was convinced he wouldn't have invited anyone over so late at night since he needed to wake up early. They believed Raquel, being clever, had meticulously planned everything. She arranged a trip to another city and attempted to tarnish her husband's reputation with false claims about his interest in adult websites and strip clubs. She also fabricated information that was included in the case file. The family of the Mario found her quick departure from their apartment suspicious, as if she were trying to hide something and dispose of the property to cover her tracks. Her rejection of Mario's inheritance, when it became known, was not a noble choice. It turned out that Mario had more debts than assets, which she would have had to pay if she had accepted the inheritance. Furthermore, accepting the inheritance would have required her to pay a significant tax, which she deemed too burdensome. Raquel's behavior at the funeral was also worrying. She arrived with assistants who took complete control of the situation, deciding when she should leave, how she should approach the grave, and how she should pose for photos. At one point, she asked to be left alone at the grave for a short time to pose for the cameras, a decision that left Mario's family confused. Some experts who spoke with Raquel believe she fits the profile of a typical integrated psychopath. This type of person has manipulative and narcissistic traits and can conceal their true identity. To avoid being revealed, they often rely on the idea that while people may see the facade they present, very few notice their true nature. Raquel, portraying herself as Mila, a beautiful woman, successfully hid her darker side, which was exposed by her husband. Unfortunately, he passed away shortly thereafter. The family of the deceased believes that Raquel skillfully used her intelligence and manipulative traits to carry out her plans. However, proving her involvement in the murder is quite complex, even though the circumstances seem clear. 10 years after the crime, Mario's family remains committed to uncovering the truth and seeking justice. Meanwhile, 50-year-old Raquel leads her life as if nothing ever occurred. She has established a new family and focused on her career, all the while denying any connection to the murder. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Philippines family. Carol and Benoa met in 2009 while working at the same bank, where Benoa was the manager and Carol was an employee. At that time, Carol was going through a tough divorce. Benoa, who had also been married before, quickly became her love at first sight, and they began a passionate romance that surprised everyone around them. Many believed their relationship was just a fleeting affair, but they proved them wrong. Their feelings deepened, and they decided to officially marry. Carol remarried in April 2012, and this marriage appeared genuinely happy. The couple seemed deeply in love, enjoyed being sociable, and loved hosting parties. They even planned a dream trip to Tenerife for their second wedding anniversary, but sadly, that plan would never materialize. Tragically, just before their trip, both Carol and Benoa were killed. At the time of their deaths, they did not have children of their own. But they are planning to have children soon. Therefore, Carol spent a lot of time with Steban, the son of friends, also bring Carol's godson, showering him with gifts and affection. Steban was a calm, sweet, and well-mannered child who appreciated their kindness. The couple Carol and Benoa loved hosting gatherings for their family and friends, and on one such occasion, they decided to Steban along. This decision led Steban to the innocent child becoming a victim of a horrific crime. On April 18, 2014, gunshots were heard near a Filipino family's home. Eyewitnesses quickly contacted the police. At around 10:15 p.m., an inspector was patrolling nearby when he received the call and rushed to the scene. He parked slightly away from the house and approached cautiously, using tactical techniques from his police training. He kept his weapon ready, suspecting that the shooter might still be there, but it turned out that the attackers had already fled. When arrived, the officer was taken aback by the amount of blood around Carol and Benoa's cars. It resembled a slaughterhouse. At that moment, all three victims were still alive. The officer first attended to the child Steban, who was lying on the ground with a severe gunshot wound to the head. He immediately called for assistance and requested an ambulance. The wait for the medics felt like an eternity, but they arrived in time to provide first aid. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, 9-year-old Steban died shortly after reaching the hospital. After that, the doctors turned there to Carol. Although she was conscious, she had lost a big amount of blood and was in serious condition. She was able to speak to the police and described how the attacker first approached her husband, Benoit. Just after that, gunshots were fired. The inspector asked Carol if she recognized the attacker, but she replied no and then lost consciousness. Meanwhile, Benoit showed almost no signs of life and was unconscious. He was placed in an ambulance along with Carol, with hopes of being saved at the medical center. Unfortunately, he died en route. Carol was the only victim who arrived at the hospital alive. She was rushed into surgery, and throughout the night, the surgeons worked tirelessly to save her, but their efforts were in vain. Carol's family was informed about the incident, and her parents and sisters were left in shock, anxiously waiting and unsure if Carol would survive. In the end, they lost her. Law enforcement officers were interviewing everyone who have witnessed the shooting. The first witness was a neighbor who saw a suspicious woman running away from the scene through his window. She was petite and slender, wearing a dark short dress. After the shooting, she quickly crossed the road and disappeared. Another witness, a former Marine, also looked out when the shooting occurred. The whole incident happened in just a few seconds before the attacker fled. He confirmed that the shooter was a woman. This neighbor's vantage point allowed him to see her getting into a car and driving away with her headlights off. He was able to provide a description of the car. There was limited information available, as there were no details regarding the license plates, and the model and color of the car could only be estimated. The police couldn't identify the shooter because there were no clear images of her face or any distinguishing features. Local residents were troubled by the event. Everyone was shocked by the tragedy, and neighbors of Carol who had CCTV cameras willingly gave the police full access to their footage. This led to the discovery of a suspicious dark sedan that parked away from Carol's home about half an hour before they left at 9:48 p.m. Just 2 minutes after the attack, this dark sedan drove away with a woman inside. The description matched the vehicle that the suspect used to flee the scene. Unfortunately, all video footage did not show the license plates or any specific details about the car. It was only through meticulous analysis of the video that the police identified the car model as a BMW 5 Series. The crimes were clearly recorded on tape. Benoit was shot 3 times, and 3 additional shots were meant for Carol, while the child Steban suffered a single gunshot wound to the head. The shooter used a 9mm pistol and aimed primarily at the upper body, leaving little chance for survival. Once investigators discovered that Benoit had recognized the shooter, they began to thoroughly examine his contacts to identify potential suspects. Detectives analyzed Benoit's computer and reviewed all communication methods, including the messaging apps used by he. The police gradually discovered that Benoit was not the ideal husband he appeared to be. Behind the facade of a perfect marriage lay several troubling truths. Benoit, who held a prominent position at the bank, frequently pursued women and used his authority to flirt with them. Multiple bank employees reported his behavior. One witness, Sandra Chundel, came to the bank in 2013 seeking a job. After a brief introduction, the manager, Benoit, invited her to his office. Sandra described feeling very uncomfortable being alone with him. He acted like a predator, rarely making eye contact and instead focusing on her neckline, which made her feel embarrassed. It seemed as if he was undressing her with his eyes. Although Benoit is seen as a loving family man, but he had regular affairs, engaging in cheating on his wife frequently rather than infrequently. This thing led to a long list of potential suspects, including his co-workers and the husbands of the women he had affairs with. However, witness accounts pointed to a woman being involved in the shooting, which drew immediate attention from investigators. Law enforcement recognized that there were many who might bear a grudge against Benoit, which meant they had a week's worth of interviews and investigations ahead of them. Benoit has a strong personality. He often speaks bluntly and is quite strict, which makes some people feel uncomfortable and stay away from him. Despite this, he is a valued member of the workplace and a great manager. Investigations into bank employees provided the police with no new leads. The next theory considered was that of murder linked to workplace issues. By examining Benoit's transactions, the police identified a couple of suspects who had strong motives for murder. While investigating Benoit's computer, the police discovered notes about Anna Maria Troiano. She married Trojan at a young age, and their marriage was initially strong. However, in 2002, they encountered serious problems when her husband, Trojan, lost his job due to the metallurgical plant's closure. At that time, they already had children, and the family's financial difficulty deeply affected him, making it difficult for him to support the household. Consequently, Anna decided to take on a different role and start her own business. Anna opened a hair salon and quickly became popular with the locals, bringing in a good income for her family. Meanwhile, Trojan took on the role of a stay-at-home dad, taking care of their children. He later joined Anna in their business and helped her grow it further. The hair salon was thriving, and the couple realized they needed more funds to expand. They envisioned a full-service beauty salon and wanted to hire other beauty professionals. They believed this would be a successful venture, but it required a significant investment for renting more space and buying new equipment and supplies. To secure the necessary funds, they approached the bank for a loan, the same bank where Benoit and Carol were employed. They spoke directly with Carol, who gave them a verbal agreement for a €175,000 loan. Anna and Trojan was eager to grow their business, so they quickly used a large portion of their own savings to rent a larger space. They were waiting for a loan from the bank, but at the last minute, Benoit discovered their situation and deemed Anna and her husband's business too risky for a loan. Benoit was strongly opposed to lending them money and refused their loan application. Unfortunately, Anna and Trojan had not yet signed a formal loan agreement, so their arrangement with the bank was only verbal. The bank manager, Benoit, acted within his rights and could deny the loan based on these circumstances, as Carol's verbal promise had no legal standing. Meanwhile, Anna and Trojan are having a lot of financial trouble after investing all their money into the business and desperately needed the loan. In response to their predicament, Anna and Trojan decided to sue the bank, even though they knew their chances of winning were slim. Ultimately, they lost the case, worsening their financial difficulties. They faced significant challenges due to ongoing pressure, leading them to lose everything. Their rush to pay rent resulted in a massive debt of €50,000. Although they rented a new space, they lacked the funds for renovations, repairs, and equipment, leaving the premises unused and without income. They also incurred hefty legal fees from hiring good lawyers. Unable to pay off their large debt all at once, they were forced to sell their house and move in with their parents. This situation causes constant conflicts between them, putting them at risk of divorce. Investigators believe that financial troubles and legal issues may have been the motive for the crime, as Anna and Trojan were desperate and destitute, so they may have wanted revenge. As a result, the police began to investigate them as potential suspects. They initially considered that the perpetrator might be a woman. However, Anna had a solid alibi. She was in another city at the time of the murder, therefore, she was immediately eliminated from the suspect list. Detectives then turned their attention to Anna's husband, Trojan. They discovered that Trojan had a criminal history involving violence. Additionally, he drove a BMW 5 Series, and older models of this car were spotted on CCTV footage near the house of Carol. The evidence against him continued to mount, especially when threats from he to Carol were found on her mobile phone, which were related to a bank's denial of a loan. Based on this information, a search warrant was issued for Trojan's family home. On May 13, 2014, 3 weeks after the murder of the Benoit family, police visited the home of Trojan's parents, where he was living. The officers searched the entire house and focused particularly on Trojan's computer. They discovered that 6 weeks prior to the murders, he had attempted to find the address of a Filipino individual on the internet, Benoit. This information, combined with other evidence, suggested that the murders were not accidental. Trojan had a motive. He had threatened and sought out the addresses of Benoit and Carol, those he blamed for his financial issues. As part of the investigation, the investigators needed to question Trojan directly. During the interrogation, he appeared calm and provided explanations for each inquiry. However, the investigators found him dishonest in his answers, so they could not release him, considering him the main suspect. Ultimately, Trojan was charged with illegal possession of a weapon, but at his parents' house, the police could not find the gun used in the murder. Trojan's wife, Anna, spoke up to defend him, claiming that his criminal acts were a thing of the past a long time ago. She explained that he had been young when he fell in with a bad crowd and, after spending 6 months in prison, decided to change his life. Over the past 13 to 14 years, Trojan had led an honest life, making it unfair to judge him solely based on a mistake from his youth. Anna stating that he could never have killed 3 people at once, especially a 9-year-old child, Steban. He loved his children deeply, and it was hard to believe that a good family man could shoot a child. He also maintained that he had an alibi for the time of the murder, which the police could not disprove during their initial interrogation. According to Trojan, he was in Germany visiting family on April 18, 2014, and he arrived around 10 p.m., which would clear him of any guilt since the attack occurred at approximately 10:30 p.m. Furthermore, witness testimonies suggested that a woman was the actual shooter. This has complicated the investigation. Trojan, who was 192 centimeters tall and weighed around 130 kilograms, was unlikely to be confused with the small woman seen wearing a short dress. This thing led to Trojan exclusion from the list of suspects, resulting in his release. However, the investigation continued. Officers traveled to Stuttgart, Germany, under a court order where they met Mario Trojana, the brother of Trojan. Mario shared crucial information, revealing that Trojan had not arrived in Stuttgart until late Saturday evening, around 11:30 p.m., the day after the massacre of the Benoit's family. He described Trojan as looking very tired and shabby. This new information shifted the direction of the investigation. It became clear that Trojan lacked an alibi, providing ample opportunity to commit the triple murder. 5 months after the violent attack on the Benoit's family, Trojan was taken into custody by police and faced several additional interrogations. The investigators were determined to uncover the truth. Initially, Trojan claimed that he left home in the evening after arguing with his wife. He said he was going to Germany to visit his brother, Mario. However, during multiple interrogations, he changed his story. He stated that he intended to end his life due to various personal issues. While driving along a long country road, he claimed to have consumed a large amount of illegal substances. He then lost consciousness and only woke up around 5 o'clock in the morning. After regaining consciousness, he decided against end his life and set off to visit his brother Mario in Stuttgart. Trojan had a new alibi that allowed him to continue lying, but he inadvertently gave the police a clue. He drove a modern car equipped with a Wi-Fi module, which automatically connects to available networks. Investigators began reviewing footage from the security cameras of Benoit's neighbors. An officer noted that a BMW 5 Series, which the attacker used, had stopped near a gym. This gym offered free Wi-Fi, and records of all connections were maintained. This allowed them to verify whether the Trojan family's BMW was near Benoit's home during the time of the shooting. The car was actually recorded at this location at the time of the shooting. Trojan made a critical error by giving his clothes to the police for examination. When forensic experts searched his house, they discovered gunpowder residues on the clothing. It became clear that Trojan was responsible for the murders of family Benoit. The next step was to persuade the jury of his guilt. On September 10, 2014, Trojan was officially charged with triple premeditated murder. There was considerable confusion and deception surrounding the case. He continually altered his story in an attempt to evade responsibility. Investigators began to suspect that his wife, Anna, might also be involved, since witnesses reported seeing a woman at the crime scene. However, there was no evidence to prove Anna was guilty, so she was not charged. On February 6, 2017, Trojan stood trial before a jury. Relatives of Benoit's family, along with Steban's relatives, were present at the execution, joining together to demand justice. They sought to hold Trojan accountable for the lives he had taken. The prosecution outlined the crime. Trojan, furious Benoit and Carol due to his own financial troubles, decided to track down and kill the couple. When their child, Steban, saw his face, he murdered the boy to eliminate a witness. The prosecutor clarified that Carol had never met Trojan before, she only knew his wife, Anna, which is why she did not recognize him during the attack. The prosecutor argued that the witnesses who claimed to see a woman at the scene were mistaken and confused a passerby for the real killer. During the trial, relatives of Benoit and Carol spoke about they, describing them as kind, friendly people and are outstanding experts in their fields. Unfortunately, Carol's kindness may have led to tragedy. She tried to help the Trojan family by promising them financial support, but her husband, who was more experienced and cautious, thought it was too risky and refused to lend them money. While the situation was distressing for the Trojan family, it wasn't without options. They could have approached other banks for a loan or explored different solutions. Instead, they chose to retaliate by killing two bankers, Benoit and Carol, with Steban. During the hearing, the accused Trojan appeared with his face covered, a request made by his lawyer to uphold the presumption of innocence. Trojan showed a complete lack of understanding of the situation and maintained his innocence until the very end. His demeanor and confidence even seemed to sway the jury. His lawyers emphasized that he was a good father and could not possibly have shot another person's child, Steban. They also argued that the absence of a murder weapon, along with witness statements confirming the presence of women at the crime scene, made it impossible to accuse Trojan. It appeared that the jury was leaning towards acquittal. However, on the sixth day of the trial, crucial evidence emerged against Trojan. A video from his mobile phone was presented, which seemingly showed him accidentally capturing himself hiding the gun under a pillow. The fact that the gun was a rare model, linked to his criminal history, weighed heavily against him. Additionally, the gun left distinct traces of gunpowder that were identified as matching. This evidence contradicted his statements, shifting the case's momentum towards the prosecution. Trojan's lies ultimately became the critical turning point in the trial. The trial lasted 2 weeks, after which the jury was certain of Trojan's guilt. Trojan was convicted of 3 counts of premeditated murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The defendant has already appealed to both the Court of Cassation and the European Court of Human Rights, seeking release due to what he claims was an unjust verdict, but both appeals were denied. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kimberly Proctor. Kimberly Proctor was born on January 1, 1992, in Langford, Canada. She came from a middle-class family. Her mother, Lucia, was a manager at Walmart, and her father, Fred, was a mechanic. Kimberly was known for her kind and loving nature, especially towards animals. She had several pets at home, including lizards, rabbits, mice, but her greatest love was for cats. Unfortunately, her fondness for cats led to years of bullying at school, where she often wore small cat ears, and this harassment continued for a long time. According to her mother, Kimberly faced bullying for most of her life. Kimberly's situation became more difficult when she was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, which made her more vulnerable to teasing. She began having panic attacks at school. As a result, her parents chose to enroll Kimberly in a different school. This school catered to young people with a variety of problems, including some who had been expelled from other schools for misbehavior. One of her classmates was Cruz Elwood, a boy who faced many challenges. Cruz lived with his mother. His father had been in prison since 2001 after being sentenced to 15 years for abusing and murdering a young girl. Cruz later admitted that he knew about his father's actions but did not want to talk about it. Despite his young age, Cruz was involved in drugs and had a history of stealing money from mailboxes. People who knew him described him as very intelligent. Another troubled student at the school was Cameron Moffat, a friend of Cruz's who was diagnosed with PTSD after being abused when he was 4 years old. Cameron had a difficult relationship with his parents, and neither medication nor counseling seemed to help. He often resisted treatment and began self-harming to cope with his anxiety. His aggressive behavior was evident both at home and at school, where he sometimes carried a knife. Cruz and Cameron met in the 5th grade and quickly became best friends. They did everything together, from skipping school to smoking marijuana. They also loved playing the computer game Warcraft and occasionally visited adult websites. Although their behavior at school was unpredictable, they were not seen as a serious threat. In February 2008, Cruz wrote a blog post about warning signs of a serial killer, listing common traits like cruelty to animals, a fascination with fire, parental abandonment, and a strong interest in violence. He pointed out that he fulfilled all 14 of the criteria he mentioned. By 2009, Kimberly had joined Cruz and Cameron's group, and they began to do everything together. When they weren't hanging out outside, they spent hours texting and chatting. During this time, Kimberly started dating Zach, who was friends with Cruz and Cameron. However, their relationship only lasted a couple of months before Zach decided to break up with her. This breakup upset Kimberly deeply, and she turned to her friends for support, spending long hours chatting online. During one of these conversations, Cameron revealed to Kimberly that he had feelings for her and thought she was beautiful. Kimberly appreciated the compliment but was only interested in Cruz, with whom she had grown closer after her breakup with Zach. Kimberly and Cruz began sharing their most private thoughts online, including secrets they had never revealed to anyone else. Kimberly opened up to Cruz about her honest feelings about her weight and height, and Cruz reassured her that she was beautiful just the way she was. However, Cruz and Cameron's lives began to take a dark and sinister turn. They began drinking blood and bodily fluids to see how they would feel. Cameron's friends said that he would sometimes lash out at his family and yell at his mother, while Cruz became increasingly aggressive toward his mother and defied any restrictions placed on him. Both boys began to have disturbing fantasies about being restrained and abused, leading them to explore adult websites with violent themes. Their discussions with Kimberly became increasingly disturbing. One day, Cameron made an innuendo-filled remark to Kimberly that upset her. When she shared this with Cruz, he responded by making the same suggestion. When Kimberly refused, Cruz threatened her ominously, saying, "Death is coming for you, and you will soon be dead." He then asked her about her plans for the next day. Cruz expressed interest in meeting her to discuss why some people were treating her so badly and other personal issues. They eventually agreed to call and meet the next day. She had no idea that Cruz had already contacted Cameron and they were exchanging messages about Kimberly. In Cameron and Cruz's conversation before the terrible events, they mentioned that they should proceed with their plan, saying that they have to be careful and that it will be interesting. They expressed their desire to do it immediately instead of waiting, saying that they will not harm her right away and can keep her alive but tied up. Later, Cameron and Cruz decide on a specific phrase to signal when to act to harm Kimberly. Cruz also suggests that they meet at the Ford bus stop at 10 o'clock. 18-year-old Kimberly accidentally found herself in a dangerous situation. That morning, Kimberly was still in bed while her mother, Lucia, prepared to leave for work. Before leaving, Lucia kissed Kimberly and expressed her love for her. Since Kimberly had no classes that day, her mother thought she would sleep in, especially since her only commitment was babysitting at 3 p.m. They had planned to start sewing Kimberly's prom dress together when Lucia returned home. However, Lucia was unaware that Kimberly had other plans. She had arranged to meet Cameron and Cruz at the bus station around 10:30 a.m. Kimberly got off the bus at the stop where her friends were waiting. Just minutes earlier, Cameron and Cruz had bought a can of gasoline as part of their terrifying plan. The three friends chatted for a while before heading to Cruz's house in Bali. Up until this point, everything seemed normal to Kimberly, and she had no idea of the terrifying situation her friends had planned for her. When they arrived at the house, Cruz used a code word to signal Cameron, and almost immediately, both attacked Kimberly, beating and kicking her. They bound her feet and ankles, stuffed a sock in her mouth, and taped it shut. Cameron and Cruz violently assaulted Kimberly for hours, ultimately causing her death by suffocation. Afterward, they desecrated her body in horrific ways, mutilating her and placing various items in her genital area, before storing her in a freezer in Cruz's garage. Cruz attempted to cover his tracks and establish an alibi by sending her a message from his computer. In this message, he pretended to be far away and asked her if she had completed her work as a nanny, claiming he needed her advice. Cameron and Cruz's actions were extremely disturbing, and they treated it as a game. That same night, after committing the horrific act, Cruz texted his girlfriend, asking her to come out of the house to meet him. Fortunately, she refused, which may have saved her life. The next morning, Cameron and Cruz placed Kimberly's body in a hockey bag and calmly took a bus to a remote forested area. There, they doused the bag with gasoline and set it on fire. During this time, Cruz made the mistake of using his cell phone to send a message. Meanwhile, Kimberly's parents and relatives were in a state of panic, unaware of her whereabouts. Her mother, Lucia, had tried to call Kimberly the day before, but when her calls went directly to voicemail, she sensed something was wrong. Lucia went to the police station to report Kimberly missing, and the search for Kimberly quickly began. After causing Kimberly's death, both Cruz and Cameron continued their lives as if nothing had happened. Cruz spent the day at home with his girlfriend, while Cameron had lunch with his mother and grandmother, then they took him to buy a new video game. That night, a young man who was hanging out with friends discovered charred body under a bridge. The body was burned beyond recognition. The body was later identified through dental records and was that of Kimberly. The tragic news devastated Kimberly's family and friends. Police arrived to investigate the crime scene. At the time, police had no leads to identify anyone responsible for this horrific crime. Kimberly's family and friends reported that she had no known conflicts with anyone and were puzzled as to who could have harmed her. In her memory, the family created a Facebook page, which police are closely monitoring in the hopes of uncovering any clues. They are also keeping a close eye on all of Kimberly's acquaintances. The story of the horrific incident shocked Canada, and every media outlet covered it. At the time, Cruz was eager to share his dark exploit with someone he trusted. He decided to use the in-game chat feature, believing that chat records were unlikely to be kept or checked. On March 23, 5 days after the murder, Cruz messaged a young girl from Halifax, urging her to read something important. He then sent her links to news articles about the incident to prove that he was telling the truth. The girl was horrified by what Cruz revealed but reacted the way he wanted, assuring him that she would always support him, no matter what his actions were. Cruz replied that that's why he trusted her, and he would repay her trust, no matter what. Suddenly, Cameron joined the conversation and backed up Cruz's account. The girl asked Cameron if he had any thoughts about Kimberly's family and friends and the lives he had impacted. Cameron simply replied that he felt no remorse for any of that. The young girl wrote to Cruz again, asking him not to repeat his previous actions. He promised he wouldn't. As time went on, the Cameron and Cruz their lives as if nothing had happened, but they kept a close eye on the investigation's progress. Their online chats and text messages mostly revolved around updates related to the case. Cruz confided to a friend that his father had advised him not to answer questions at school. This advice may have stemmed from his father's suspicion that Cruz was involved in Kimberly's death or knew who was responsible. An incident later occurred involving Samantha, one of Kimberly's close friends, who overheard Cruz making negative comments about Kimberly. Samantha asked him to stop, explaining that it still hurt her to hear such things so soon after Kimberly's death. In response, Cruz yelled that he did not care about Kimberly's death. Another student even reported hearing Cruz say that he was glad Kimberly was dead because he did not like her. At that point, police began investigating Cameron and Cruz, leading to their questioning. Both admitted to seeing Kimberly on the morning she went missing, but said they didn't spend much time with her because she had to go to school. Police began monitoring Cameron and Cruz's online activities. Police obtained a warrant to install wiretaps in their home and both were placed under close surveillance. Their cell phones were also tapped and investigations into their devices were conducted. Disturbing evidence was discovered, including text messages exchanged between them in online chats. Police seized numerous documents related to their activities. Police believe Cruz and Cameron were responsible for Kimberly's death. Cameron and Cruz were then arrested and charged with Kimberly's murder. Both appeared calm and unresponsive. Cruz remained silent throughout the interrogation. Cameron, on the other hand, repeatedly taunted the police and refused to provide any information. He eventually confessed to his crimes in a cold manner. After Cameron's confession, Cruz was forced to admit everything. They both later pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and destruction of human remains. A year after the events of 2011, Cameron and Cruz appeared at their trial, appearing calm and talking animatedly to each other about the questions they were being questioned about. Throughout the hearing, they remained calm and unflinching. A psychological evaluation found that Cruz displayed characteristics of a rapist that were rare for his age and was at high risk of committing violent acts again. He was also diagnosed with clinical psychopathy. The psychiatrist indicated that Cruz would require intensive and prolonged supervision for at least the next 10 years. Cameron had a high rate of reoffending and serious mental health issues. During the hearing, the judge needed to decide whether to try both young men as adults and transfer them to an adult prison or to treat them as juveniles. It's important to note that the defense requested they be tried as adults, believing this would provide the boys with better educational and rehabilitation opportunities. Only Kimberly's parents were focused on seeking the death penalty for the Cameron and Cruz. However, Canada does not have a death penalty. If the young men are tried as adults, they would face life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after serving 25 years. If Cruz and Cameron had been tried as juveniles, the maximum sentence they would have faced would have been 6 years, along with 4 years of community service, Cameron Moffat and Cruz Wellwood were then sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of appealing for bail after only 10 years. Kimberly's family has expressed their anger at the lenient sentence. Kimberly's father, Fred, expressed concern that Cameron and Cruz might continue their harmful behavior and that this was unacceptable. Fred pointed out that both had confessed to their actions but showed no remorse, which he believed justified their lifelong detention. Meanwhile, Pacific High School, which Kimberly and the two killers attended, has established a protocol for dealing with threats of violence. The protocol would allow police, schools, and social services to exchange information about students who might pose a threat in order to prevent tragic consequences. When asked why they had treated Kimberly's body that way, Cruz mentioned that for him, it was about finding the satisfaction he craved. And he felt a sense of power in taking someone's life. He shared that his life until then had felt empty and pointless, and this act gave him a sense of fulfillment. Cruz's first petition for parole was set for June 2019 but was postponed to August. The psychological evaluation conducted at that time was nearly identical to the initial assessment, indicating that Cruz was still completely unfit for parole. Consequently, the specialist did not recommend granting him release in 2020. His appeal was denied once more, meaning Cruz will have to wait until 2025 for another chance at parole. Sometimes people get a second chance, but this case should not have been given a second chance. It was clear that there was a deliberate intention to commit a terrible act. Individuals like Cameron and Cruz acted out their darkest fantasies without remorse. In fact, it was revealed that Kimberly was just one of 3 victims they targeted. Given the nature of their actions and the psychiatric evaluations, it is clear that Cameron and Cruz should not be allowed to live freely in society. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Gladys Ricart. In 1979, in Tamboril, Dominican Republic, 20 years old, Gladys Ricart was raising her young son alone after her high school relationship failed. Her sister Norma lived in the United States, and she dreamed of joining her. Determined to make her dream come true, she worked tirelessly, saved every penny, and made many sacrifices. Eventually, her hard work paid off, and she was able to move to the U.S., settling with her sister's family in Manhattan, New York. However, she could not afford to bring her son Davis with her initially, so he stayed with family back in the Dominican Republic. After arriving in the U.S., Gladys focused on learning English and found a job. She worked diligently to save enough money to reunite with her son. By 1983, she succeeded in bringing 4-year-old Davis to the U.S. Determined to build a brighter future, she enrolled in college. Believed that education is the key to opening up better opportunities for yourself. She graduated with a degree in economics and used her knowledge to pursue a career in accounting. Due to her hard work, she quickly became a top expert and one of the most important employees of the company. Gladys started from the very bottom and worked her way up to become the chief accountant at a large travel agency in the heart of Manhattan. Over time, she improved her English, pursued an education, built a successful career, and saved enough money to buy an apartment. In many ways, she had achieved the American dream. The only thing missing was a family and true love. Despite this, she was cautious when it came to relationships. While it seemed that she prioritized her career over marriage, this was deep down. She longed to meet her soulmate. By 1992, after living in the United States for 10 years, Gladys had a daily routine. She took the subway to work in the morning and returned in the evening to her sister's house. One day on the subway, she met Agustin Garcia. He is a well-known leader in Dominica and also a successful professional. At 40, he has built a successful career after immigrating from the Dominican Republic to the United States as a child. Like Gladys, he had risen from poverty to success. By the time they met, he owned several small businesses and lived in a large house with his 2 children from a previous marriage. Agustin was highly respected within the Dominican community and was known as a dependable and helpful individual. Having experienced the hardships of migration and immigration himself, he is passionate about helping anyone who wishes to pursue this challenging path. He eventually became the director of the Dominican Chamber of Commerce in New York, along with several other organizations connected to his homeland. Beyond his roles in these organizations, he was deeply involved in social initiatives. Through his efforts, several kindergartens and schools were established, establishing him as a respected and influential person in the community. Agustin seems to be the ideal mate for Gladys, a determined and compassionate young woman. What she found most appealing about him was his kind and gentle nature. He was polite, sociable, and carried himself like a true gentleman, which immediately caught her attention. Their meeting was purely coincidental, as Agustin rarely used the subway. However, on this particular day, his car broke down and he ended up taking the train. He was instantly captivated by Gladys's beauty and decided to strike up a conversation. They spent the rest of the ride talking, exchanged phone numbers, and quickly arranged to meet again. From that moment, their romance began. Agustin frequently took Gladys to restaurants, treated her to exquisite meals, and showered her with expensive gifts. When her family learned about her new boyfriend, Agustin, they were happy for her. He seemed like an ideal partner and a good father to her son. After some time together, Agustin invited Gladys to move in with him, and she eagerly accepted this long-awaited proposal. According to what she shared with her family and friends, her greatest dream at the time was for Agustin to propose marriage so they could build a family together. She envisioned raising 3 children with him, and even hoped to have more children of their own. At that point, she was not yet 33 years old. Once Gladys moved in with Agustin, things quickly began to deteriorate. Her son, Davis, had great difficulty getting along with Agustin's children. The boy tried his best, especially because of the sincere advice of his mother, who always wanted him to learn how to build good relationships with people. However, Agustin's children treated Davis with arrogance, and the situation never improved. The situation is getting more complicated. Agustin consistently sided with his children, even when they were clearly in the wrong, which created strain in his relationship with Gladys. After 2 years of enduring such a life and constant arguments, she decided she didn't want to cause her son any more pain. She told Agustin that they should stop living together. Agustin agreed, but did not end their relationship. He helped her find a new house, just a few minutes' drive from his own. It was a spacious 2-story house, and he didn't hesitate to spend money on her, perhaps as a way to ease the tension between them. They continued to see each other when he visited she. By this time, her family and friends had grown so accustomed to he that they considered him practically part of the family. He introduced Gladys as his wife wherever they went. Although they were not legally married, but Gladys kept trying to convince Agustin to have a wedding. However, he firmly refused because of the negative experience in his previous marriage. He insisted he didn't want to marry or have children again. According to Gladys's relatives, over time, this situation took a toll on her. The happiness in her relationship gradually fades, and Agustin's unpleasant personality becomes more and more apparent. He frequently had affairs and increasingly exhibit over-controlling behavior. The situation becomes even more complicated for Gladys, as she has known about his actions, but kept silent for a long time to avoid causing conflict. Unfortunately, her silence only made things worse. During one argument, he chased she and attacked her. She managed to hide and lock herself in a room, but from that moment, she realized it was time to end the relationship. However, she remained fearful of his manipulation for a while. Gladys wanted a solid reason to break up, one that would leave Agustin with no way to argue. The simplest way was to catch him in one of his affairs. By the fall of 1998, the situation became more tense when she went to Agustin's office and caught him with another woman. This gave her the perfect opportunity to end things. She immediately told him that things were over between them, left his house, and informed all his acquaintances that he was no longer a part of her life. Even though they had broken up, Augustine was not ready to accept such changes. He considered Gladys as his property after 7 years together. Following their argument, he repeatedly called her, left gifts on her doorstep, including bouquets of flowers and even a Bible. Gladys thinks these gestures are just meant to make her come back, but her family believed they held deeper symbolic meaning. Regardless, she was determined not to rekindle their relationship under any circumstances. Several months later, Gladys met a man named James Preston Jr. at a restaurant during her lunch break. James, who also worked in accounting and moonlighted as a musician, immediately clicked with she. They quickly fell in love, and after a few meetings, they decided to make their relationship public. Over the next 2 months, they spent all their free time together, and eventually, they set a wedding date for September 26, 1999. Gladys and her family were overjoyed as her lifelong dream of a wedding and wearing a wedding dress finally came true. She immersed herself completely in planning the wedding, focusing on every step of the preparation with complete joy. She was so preoccupied that she didn't realize Augustine had been coming to her house nearly every night, watching her for hours. His obsessive behavior made it clear he couldn't let go of his possessiveness. On August 12, about 6 weeks before the wedding, Gladys and her fiancé, James, were enjoying a quiet evening together when Augustine suddenly showed up at the door. Initially, he calmly asked to speak with her, but she refused. His demeanor quickly changed. He began yelling and throwing stones at the windows. Worried he might get more aggressive, she called the police. Augustine was taken into custody, but she chose not to press charges, wanting to avoid causing him trouble and to stay focused on her wedding preparations. This decision turned out to be a significant mistake. In September, just 2 days before the wedding, Gladys went to a store to purchase some items needed for the bridesmaids. Unbeknownst to her, Augustine had been following her. He approached her, hugged her as if they were still in a relationship, and behaved as though everything was fine between them. Gladys didn't resist, fearing that rejecting him might provoke his anger. They exchanged a few words before saying goodbye. That evening, she confided in James and family, sharing her discomfort and concerns about Augustine's intrusive behavior. However, she had no idea just how dangerous he truly was. On September 26, 1999, the day she had long awaited, her wedding day, finally arrived. She was at home surrounded by her family and friends, preparing for her wedding ceremony. She wore a wedding dress, had her hair, makeup done, radiant and happy to be a bride. Photos and videos captured these joyful moments, which tragically turned out to be the final ones of her life. Meanwhile, the groom, James, was already waiting for her at the church. However, the joy of the wedding was spoiled when Augustine, who was watching her, suddenly appeared. He used violence to murder her, causing her instant death. When paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do to save her. Her dream of a wedding was painfully unfinished. Augustine was immediately arrested and taken into custody without attempting to flee or resist. During his interrogation, he admitted to frequently driving past Gladys's house, claiming it was due to his sentimentality. On the morning of September 26, he was surprised to see a crowd of people dressed formally, along with several limousines parked outside her home. He claimed he had no idea she was getting married that day. After driving past the house multiple times, he eventually stopped in front of it. Still unsure whose wedding it was, he decided to go inside to find out. As Augustine got out of his car across the street, Gladys's brother, Juan, approached him cautiously, aware of his bad temper. Juan tried to convince him to leave to avoid disrupting the wedding. It was then that he realized she was marrying someone else, but he didn't show any reaction. Augustine claimed he had been invited to the wedding, so Juan did not stop him, and he calmly entered the house. No one objected to his presence. Initially, when questioned about the attack on Gladys, Agustin claimed that he had no memory of it. However, after a while, he confessed to the detectives. The next day, he was brought to court for a preliminary hearing where he faced the charges against him. During this hearing, he had the opportunity to plead guilty and avoid a lengthy trial. The bail was set at $5 million, showing that he is a major threat to the community. The attack quickly became a major focus of attention because of the extensive media coverage. Journalists raced to create sensational headlines, spread rumors, and even offer unsubstantiated theories. Images of the killer, Agustin, began to appear regularly on national news. The case's prominence attracted numerous lawyers, especially top lawyers, who want to use the trial to enhance their reputation and advance their careers. Agustin's trial was scheduled for October 2, 2001, allowing the defense nearly 2 years to prepare and build a more positive image for the defendant. The hired lawyers quickly engaged with the media, organizing press conferences and making public statements. Their objective was to influence public opinion about the crime by portraying Agustin as a victim. Their first move was to accuse Gladys's brother, Juan, and her son Davis of assaulting Agustin. They argued that there was no intention to kill Gladys, and her death happened accidentally when he defended himself from an attack by Juan and Davis. At the same time, the defense sought to discredit Gladys by accusing her of multiple betrayals. They claimed she had been planning to reconcile with Agustin, but was secretly preparing to marry James. According to the defense, this betrayal pushed Agustin into a mental breakdown, leading him to attack her. They stated that he had been devastated to discover that Gladys, who had been holding hands with him at the supermarket just the day before, was preparing to marry James. They believe this is a crime due to emotional outbursts, which qualifies as manslaughter under state law. If accepted, this argument would significantly reduce Agustin's punishment to a sentence of 5 to 10 years in prison instead of life imprisonment. The defense emphasized that Agustin was a compassionate person who cared about the Latino community in New York. This has had a strong impact on public opinion. When false rumors began circulating that Gladys had been unfaithful to Agustin, her image in the public eye became negative. Some even believed that she deserved her fate. This was a devastating blow to her family. Realizing the immense damage caused by Agustin's legal team, her relatives started attending every press conference to protect her reputation. Gladys's family, siblings, and extended relatives denied the infidelity rumors, calling them malicious lies. They emphasized that the relationship between she and Agustin had ended long ago and could not be rekindled. It was Agustin who was always following her and acted inappropriately. They emphasized that out of compassion, Gladys did not file a lawsuit against him before the murder. The judge was informed about the murder. Press conferences and interviews with journalists were officially prohibited, but they had already caused harm to Gladys's reputation, create difficulties for the prosecution. During the trial, the defense team continued to depict Agustin as a victim, while tarnishing Gladys's image. However, the prosecution has one big advantage. The attack and Gladys's death had been caught on camera. The opening part of the wedding ceremony and preparations were recorded, but Agustin hadn't noticed it. Before the trial began, only the judge was allowed to view the footage. The defense argued that showing the video to the jury was unfair and worked hard to block its usage as evidence. After lengthy deliberations, the court ruled that the video could be used, but only the part where Gladys was attacked. This was a 15-second clip, and the prosecution worried it wouldn't be enough to persuade the jury, particularly since the defense could argue the clip was taken out of context. This limitation gave the defense some opportunity to build their case. The defense argued that Agustin was forced to take up arms after being attacked by Gladys' brother and son, and claimed that Agustin's attack on Gladys was unintentional. Despite the objections of Gladys's family, The defense insisted that everything stemmed from her dissolute behavior. They presented several witnesses, including a neighboring family. The father and daughter testified that they had recently seen Gladys at Augustine's house and believed the two were still living together as a couple. In reality, Gladys had visited only to collect her remaining belongings. Through such testimony, the defense succeeded in making the jury sympathize with Augustine. However, the prosecution was prepared to counter these claims. The prosecution relied heavily on video evidence showing the crime. The video captured Augustine murdering Gladys in front of her family, including her son, shows that he did not act in self-defense. The footage shows that after he entered her home, no one attacked or threatened him, contrary to his testimony. However, he still attacked Gladys as soon as he entered. The prosecution argued this was a premeditated act, born out of jealousy. The prosecutor's office attempted to counter misleading statements from defense attorneys who sought to portray Gladys as an immoral person. There was evidence proving that after the breakup, Augustine had stalked she for an extended period. All of her relatives confirmed this. Even her son was afraid of he, knowing how cruel he truly was. Augustine's kindness and selflessness were merely a facade, hiding his true sinister nature. For at least several months, he had been surveilling her and making unannounced visits. In his car, authorities discovered a list of license plate numbers belonging to cars parked near her house. He wasn't just spying on her. He was meticulously tracking everyone in her vicinity, likely to distinguish the neighbor's vehicles from the car of her future husband, James. During the trial, Augustine made an unexpected and controversial decision. He chose to testify on his own behalf before the jury. This decision significantly influenced the outcome of the case. In legal practice, such a move can either be a strategic advantage or a disastrous mistake for the accused. The prosecution asked him to recount the incident that took place in the house. One would think he would tailor his testimony to fit the defense's arguments, that he acted in a state of temporary insanity and was not in control of himself. He alleged that Juan and Davis attacked him, but this claim had already been disproven by video evidence. He also said that at that time, he lost of awareness and could not remember how he attacked her. However, he did not provide any evidence to support his claim of temporary amnesia. Although Augustine tried to show remorse and even shed tears, his actions were not convincing enough. For the prosecution, his testimony only strengthened their case, as it contradicted the defense's argument and offered no plausible reason for his actions. On February 1, 2002, Gladys's family awaited the final verdict. After a lengthy hearing, the jury deliberated and found Augustine guilty of premeditated murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 30 years. Gladys was buried in her hometown of Tamboril in the Dominican Republic. Her body was brought home a week after her death and she was buried in her wedding dress. After his conviction, Augustine refused to speak publicly or give any opinion. A reporter later discovered that he turned to religion early in his imprisonment and began preaching to other inmates. Meanwhile, his lawyers fought for a reduced sentence, but several appeals were denied. Augustine remains in prison and will be eligible for parole in 2029.